Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Broccoli Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Rare Dollmaker Quirk. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Midoriya Izuku's discovery of his quirk was completely by accident. He was 4 years old and just came back from a checkup at the doctor's to confirm that he did not have the extra toe joint and was now sitting with his mom on the couch, playing with her hair by brushing it. "Why did you have to talk to the doctor too, Mom?" Midoriya asked. "I was doing a checkup too, dear." Inko responded. "But you already have your quirk." Inko let out a small laugh. "They were doing other checkups that we have to do sometimes, like checking my weight and height." "Did the doctor say you were okay?" Midoriya asked, now sounding slightly worried. Inko quickly replied, "Everything is fine, sweetie, don't worry. I am 61 kilograms and 1.68 meters, just like I should be." Midoriya threaded his fingers through his mom's hair, muttering to himself, 61 kilograms and 1.68 meters. He fidgeted with the loose hairs on the brush and smiled, now knowing his mom isn't sick. That's when the light appeared. It was a brilliant green, the same color as his eyes, that appeared in the hand of the one that was playing with the brush. It swirled around him before moving towards the center of the living room, in front of the TV, and began to take shape. The light pulsated and grew in height before vanishing, leaving behind a familiar sight. It was an almost perfect replica of Inko, almost being the keyword. It had the same clothes she was wearing along with the same figure and hair as well. Everything seemed to be in place except for her eyes. What should have been a matching set of green eyes was instead a pair of completely white eyes, no pupil or iris to be seen. When faced with a creepy replica of herself, Inko did the only logical thing. She yelled. She also grabbed her son and went behind the couch to hide him, waiting for her clone to attack, but it did nothing but stood there with no expression on its face. Inko looked at it with fear as she held tightly onto Midoriya, who, instead of being afraid as well, looked at it with curiosity, almost being drawn to it. A tugging feeling in his chest seemed to be attached to it. He finally found his voice as he called out, "What are you?" Inko turned to her son to hush him but was startled by the clone taking a step forward. "I am your doll, Izuku," it replied, its voice exactly like Inko's. The Midoriyas looked towards each other in confusion before looking at the doll. "What do you mean?" Inko asked, only to be met with no answer. Midoriya stood up and repeated the question. The doll looked to him and smiled. "I'm your quirk, Izuku." Returning to the Dr. Tsubasa with a lookalike of Inko trailing behind them was unexpected to say the least, but at least the hours spent there finally gave them some answers. Firstly, after asking questions about what happened beforehand, they discovered the conditions of Midoriya's quirk to be activated, the person's height, weight, and a piece of DNA, not just hair, that Midoriya must be touching. This was tested when Midoriya held onto a fingernail that Tsubasa cut off after telling him his height and weight. Second, Midoriya could only seem to summon one doll at a time, as Inko's disappeared when Tsubasa's appeared. Midoriya also felt the tugging feeling in his chest disappear for a moment before coming back, now connected to Tsubasa's doll. Third, the dolls only listened to Midoriya, as it ignored anything the doctors or Inko told it to do or asked, so Midoriya had to play the middleman for them. Fourth, and what seemed to be the most interesting thing, the dolls had a weaker version of its original's quirk. The largest thing Inko could draw to her was a pot in her kitchen, while doll Inko could only seem to use its quirk on a notebook at most. Finally, the dolls only seem to go away under 3 circumstances: either a new doll is made, Midoriya summons it away, or if the doll takes a specific amount of damage. Its bodies were weaker than its originals, so it was able to be taken down much faster. Midoriya left the doctor's office with a smile on his face. He finally got his quirk. "Can we go to Kaken's house?" he asked his mom as they got in the car. Inko smiled at her son's excitement and nodded. "I'm sure everyone will be so excited to see your quirk." They weren't excited, they were ecstatic. The look of shock on Bakugu's face when a perfect replica of him appeared in front of him was one Midoriya would treasure forever. He commanded the doll to play the victim while he and Bakugu played the villain and hero. Midoriya smiled as he went to bed that night. He would be a hero just like All Might. When Midoriya was 12 years old, he realized he may have his work cut out for him. He and Bakugo were walking home from school when Midoriya mentioned something about being a hero, causing Bakugo to pause and stare at Midoriya. "You're still on about that?" he asked. Midoriya looked at his friend in confusion. "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?" Instead of explaining, Bakugo pulled out a strand of hair from his head and handed it to Midoriya. "Summon my doll," he ordered. Midoriya thought about Bakugo's updated height and weight, and soon enough, Bakugo's doll stood in between them, wearing Aldra's black uniform, staring at Bakugo with blank eyes. The two of them learned that as they aged and progressed, so did the dolls. The doll's quirk may have gotten stronger, but it was still very weak compared to the real deal. Bakugo looked around for a second before launching an explosion at its chest, causing it to fly back and hit the ground, not getting up from such a hit to its weak body. Midoriya looked at his friend in shock. "What was that for?" he asked, summoning the doll away before anyone noticed. "You have a weak meat shield and no way to defend yourself right now. How do you expect to be a hero like that?" Bakugo demanded. Midoriya opened his mouth to argue back but closed it quickly, not having a retort. Bakugo continued on. "I've been thinking about this for a while. My quirk has grown since we were young, but you? It's been the exact same. I've entertained all your hero hopes because we were young, but now we're going to graduate soon, so it's time to get serious. I'll be going to UA with or without you." Midoriya looked up at his best friend in disbelief, not because of the harsh tone, he was used to that, but because he was onto something. As much as he's experimented with his quirk and made his dolls stronger, everything was reset when he summoned a new one. It was a double-edged sword, but he was not going to give up at all. "I'll be going to UA too, Kakin." "Then get your sheet together," he said, moving past him to go home. He stopped and turned around to look at Midoriya one last time. "Want to hear something interesting? Your name can also be read as Deku, like those useless wooden puppets. Fitting for you and your quirk unless you do something about." With that, Bakugo turned around and headed home without Midoriya. Midoriya stared at Bakugo's retreating form, frustrated with the situation he found himself in. His hand tightened around the hair he was still clutching and walked over to the empty park to summon Bakugo's doll again. "There must be something I'm missing," he thought. With a flash of light, Bakugo's doll returned, but there was something different about it. Instead of being made brand new like it usually was, it had a giant hole in its shirt, the edges of it singed from a heated attack. Bakugo's heated attack. Midoriya looked at the strand of hair in his hand in awe. The DNA he holds onto to create the dolls never disappears when the doll appears, but Midoriya normally just drops it afterwards and gets a new piece of DNA to remake them, but if he can use the same piece of DNA to keep the same doll, then he may have just found his key to UA. It's been a year since Midoriya made his discovery in the park, and he has never been more thankful for his notebooks in his life. He has gone back and forth between using the dolls of him Mom and Bakugo's to train, keeping their hair strands in 2 different lockets he wears around his neck for easy access. His notebooks kept all his thoughts about what they could do with their quirks, and now, he was able to put them to the test with his dolls. The doctor said that the dolls were made with a weaker version of the original's quirk, but he never said that they couldn't be trained. Midoriya chose to hide in a trash-infested beach nearby in order to train his dolls, not wanting to get in trouble for public quirk use. He sat on an overturned bookshelf and commanded doll Inko to start summoning scraps towards her. In the year since he began, doll Inko has upgraded from floating notebooks to floating a single shelf towards her. Midoriya pointed to a broken metal door on the ground nearby. "Try lifting that," he told her. Doll Inko lifted her hand and pointed at the door, watching as it shook and lifted in the air. It moved 2 feet before hitting the ground with a loud thud, crashing into some of the metal. Midoriya froze and listened carefully, hoping no one heard the commotion, but luck was not on his side as he heard the shuffling of sand nearby, and soon enough, someone walked into Midoriya's clearing. The man was giant, around 7 feet tall, and had blonde hair as messy as a lion's mane. He looked horrifically unhealthy with his clothes hanging over his thin body, hollow cheeks, and sunken-in eyes. Midoriya prayed he was not a secret cop. "My boy, are you okay?" the man asked him, a concerned look on his face. I am, sir. Sorry about the noise." I was just training with my quirk. Midoriya quickly explained. The man looked from Midoriya to doll Inko and tilted his head in confusion. What exactly is your quirk, my boy? He asked. Midoriya's nervous energy dissipated as he happily explained his quirk in full detail to the man, who was giving him his full attention. So as long as I keep the same piece of DNA, the doll's history won't be erased. I'm finishing up with my mom's doll and then I'll start working with my friend's doll. He finished. Why not just have them both work at once? The man asked. I've tried to make another doll while one is still here, but it hasn't worked so far. Midoriya said sadly. The man thought for a moment before taking a step towards Midoriya. I've worked with quirks in the past. Perhaps I could be of some assistance if you explain your situation? He asked. Midoriya nodded and explained. When a doll is made, it feels like there's a connection between us, like a tugging feeling. When the doll disappears, the connection breaks. Like a puppet string. The man mutters under his breath. Try visualizing the string connecting you to this doll right here, and when you summon your friend's doll, hold tightly to the string. Midoriya nods and opens the Bakugo locket. Pressing his finger to the hair, he closes his eyes and feels the string connecting him to doll Inko and holds onto it tightly as he creates doll Bakugo. He could feel the strain against doll Inko grow stronger, but he clenches his teeth and refuses to give up. After a moment, the strain disappears and Midoriya thinks he failed, but when he opens his eyes, he sees doll Inko and doll Bakugo staring at him. I did it, he whispers in disbelief. I can't believe I did it. He turns to the man to see him smiling proudly at Midoriya. Thank you so much, Mr. Yagi. Yagi Toshinori, the man replied. I'm glad I could be of assistance. Are you doing this for hero training? I'm doing the UA entrance exam next year. Midoriya explained. Well, I wish you luck with that, my boy. I didn't seem to get your name. Midoriya Izuku, sir. Well, Midoriya, I must be going, but I hope to see you around. Thank you again, Yagi-san. Midoriya said as Yagi waved goodbye. Once he was gone, he pulled out his phone and took a picture of the two dolls and sent to Bakugo. Seconds later, he got a reply that nearly made him fall off the bookshelf laughing. What the F dash? It was 2 months later when Midoriya sees Yagi again. He just didn't realize it at the time. Bakugo was homesick, so he ended up walking home alone after school, trying to forget his classmates' taunts when they found out he wanted to go to UA with his useless quirk. He sighed as he kept walking, wanting to get home and eat so he could continue training his dolls. A medium-sized body to hide in, a voice from behind him gurgled. Midoriya moved to turn around but could not even move an inch before all he could feel was liquid. A villain? He thought as he tried to claw at it. Hold still, kid. It'll be over fast, the villain whispered to Midoriya, but he still kept kicking. He moved his hands to the locket higher up on his chest and opened it just enough for him to place a finger on it, summoning his doll to his side. He managed to choke out a small attack before the sludge filled his mouth. That was all doll Bakugo needed before he let out an explosion towards the villain, shocking him enough to drop Midoriya. Midoriya fell to the ground and began coughing. The last thing he heard was a booming Detroit smash before the world went dark. He awoke to a blue sky and a stinging cheek as he sat up and looked around. He saw doll Bakugo standing by, staring at All Might and... Wait, what the F dash? All Might? Midoriya shouted, staring up at his hero in awe. The man looked back at him, giving him his signature, blinding smile. Young man, I am very happy to see you're all right. You've got quite the quirk on you. It distracted the villain long enough for me to attack it and capture it, he explained, holding up a bottle of sludge. Midoriya opened his mouth but no coherent words seemed to come out. I thank you. For saving me, that is. Can you sign my dash? Notebook. All Might asked, holding up said notebook already. One step ahead of you, my boy. You've got quite the notes here. Are you planning on becoming a hero? Yes. I want to go to UA like you did. Midoriya excitedly replied. You've got quite the mind, but here is a word of advice to you. The entrance exam will need you to bulk up quite a bit. There's a beach nearby where I'm sure you can put on some muscle clearing it. All Might said. Midoriya nodded along, taking in his idol's words carefully. All Might handed Midoriya the notebook and waved. I must be off now. Good luck, young Midoriya. With that, All Might leaped into the air, leaving behind a gust of wind. Midoriya stood there in shock. He met All Might. All Might called him smart. All Might gave him advice. He walked over to his bag with a giddy smile on his face and picked it up before walking over to Dollmaker. Thanks for saving me, he told it, ignoring how it did so because he told it to. The doll gave a short nod to Midoriya before looking at something on the ground. Midoriya looked down too and picked it up, seeing it was a strand of blonde hair, more golden than the ones on Dollmaker's head. Midoriya quickly shoved it into Dollmaker's hand. He doesn't know my quirk and I don't have his permission. Blow it up. The doll obeyed. Midoriya summoned it away and looked down at his notebook, where All Might's signature covered 2 whole pages. He smiled and raced home with a new burst of determination, not noticing how All Might knew his name even though he didn't tell him. That evening, he walked over to Dagobah Beach and looked over the trash-filled horizon, already thinking of a plan to clean it all. It used to be such a lovely sight, a voice from behind said. Midoriya turned around to see Yagi approaching him. I got some advice today that I'm going to follow. I'm going to try and clear the beach. Midoriya declared. All of it? Yagi asked. Up. I'm doing all or nothing for this to get into you. Plus ultra, right? Yagi smiled at him. Plus ultra indeed. It is quite dangerous without any supervision, though. Can you supervise me then? Midoriya asked. Yagi looked taken aback before nodded to the boy. I'd be happy to, young Midoriya. With that, Midoriya's 10 months of hell began. Training under Yagi's supervision was more fun than Midoriya expected. He had so many stories to tell about his travels to America or any funny anecdote to keep Midoriya entertained and motivated. Midoriya had thought of him as a nice companion to keep him company, but one afternoon showed him that maybe he was much more than that. What Midoriya has conveniently kept hidden from Yagi was all the extra work he was doing. He wasn't kidding when he said he wanted to clear the beach in the 10 months and he was not going to let anything stop him. One afternoon about 5 months in, however, he realized he may have made a slight mistake. One second he was carrying a microwave to Yagi's truck, the next, he was on his back and looking up at Yagi's concerned face. Midoriya, my boy, are you all right? Yagi asked as he helped Midoriya sit upright. I am? What happened, Yagi-san? Midoriya groaned as he lifted himself. I noticed you stumble and when I was about to ask if you were all right, you hit the ground. You were only out for 2 minutes. Yagi explained. But Midoriya, are you doing more work? Midoriya fidgeted with the sand on the ground as he looked down. I have. While I cannot discourage ambition, you need to do this safely. Yagi told him. I have some experience with training others, so next time we come here, I'll have a new meal and workout plan to fit extra work in done for you. Next time? Yes, next time. Right now, we're going to have a cheat day and grab some ice cream. Yagi said, getting up and extending a hand over to Midoriya. Midoriya smiled as he was pulled up by him. They gathered their things and went to the ice cream shop near the beach. Midoriya was amazed at how quickly Yagi was able to improve the situation, quickly finding a solution, and also making him smile with ease. The two sat down in a booth after ordering, both coincidentally choosing mint. You like mint chocolate chip too, Yagi-san? I would order it as a kid because it was green like my hair. Midoriya said. It became a favorite of mine because of an old friend of mine. Yagi hesitantly said. He actually has green hair like you. Midoriya decided not to press into whatever made Yagi waver, instead deciding to change the subject by telling him stories about him and Bakugo and the trouble they would get into with his dolls. Yagi smiled at the excitable boy, wondering if this is how Nana saw him. 5 months later, Yagi could hardly believe what he was seeing. There Midoriya was, atop a pile of trash and screaming his heart out towards the clear horizon of Dagobah Beach. You did it. Yagi said in disbelief. I'm so proud of your hard work, my boy. Thank you, Yagi-san. I'm proud of what this means. Midoriya replied. That you're ready for your exam today? Not just that. Midoriya began, looking out towards the sunrise. You told me that this beach used to be such a lovely sight, and you probably weren't the only one who thought that. Now that the beach is cleared, everyone can enjoy themselves again. What Yagi wouldn't realize until later on was that this was the moment he realized that there was so much to Midoriya Izuku than he initially thought. Every piece of trash he picked up was to create a future memory on this beach for anyone who stepped foot on it, and the first memory here was between those two. Midoriya, Yagi began, looking across the horizon. Has anyone ever told you that many heroes wish to have even a fraction of the heart you have? After a moment of silence, Yagi turned to the boy, who was staring up at him with tears streaming down his face. No one has ever told me that. Midoriya whispered. Yagi stretched his arms out and pulled the boy into a hug. You're going to be amazing. Could you have been any slower? Bakugo growled at him. I was standing here alone looking like some effing chump. Sorry Kaken, I got held up by something. Midoriya replied as the two crossed the threshold of Yue's gate. Midoriya stared up at the gates in awe. He couldn't believe he was finally here, looking up at Yue. And now he was looking at Yue's ground. His face never hit the ground however as he suddenly felt all weight leaving his body. Sorry about using my quirk on you, a bright voice said from above. Falling would be bad luck, wouldn't it? God. Midoriya thought, but no, it was not God. He was brought back to a solid 90 degrees by a short girl with bobbed brown hair and a kind smile. Good luck on the exam, she said before walking inside the building. Midoriya turned towards Bakugo, only to notice he was no longer at his side but instead was climbing up the steps to enter. Midoriya hurried to catch up. Why did you leave me? Midoriya asked him. You're an embarrassment to Auntie's name. Bakugo replied nonchalantly. Now let's go find our seats. The written exam was straightforward, nothing he wasn't already prepared for, but the practical exam was where his nerves were starting to show, and even present mixed presence didn't seem to help as he continuously muttered. He looked from his card to Bakugo to see if they would be in the same area. Looks like they want to separate friends. Bakugo commented, looking at they and B on their cards. Did you just imply that we're friends? Midoriya whispered. I will boil your teeth while they are still in your mouth. Bakugo hissed. Of course that's when the guy in front of him who was asking Mike a question decided to call him out in front of everyone and not Bakugo, because why not? So now Midoriya stood in front of the gates to the practical exam, wishing he could just fast forward until it was over so he wouldn't have to wait in anticipation. Looking around, he spotted the not God girl from earlier and decided to head towards her to thank her for earlier. What do you think you're doing? A voice from behind him said. Midoriya turned to see the kid who scolded him earlier staring down at him with a disappointed look on his face. Were you about to distract that girl over there? Midoriya opened his mouth to reply to the boy, but was interrupted by Present Mix's voice booming above the crowd. Begin! The crowd looked around in confusion, wondering what the hero meant. You think you get a countdown in real life? Go, go, go! With that, the herd of hopeful heroes made their way into the arena, Midoriya trailing not too far behind. As he ran, he opened both lockets and created Doll Inko and Doll Bakugo almost instantaneously, now being so used to it. Midoriya stopped for a moment to look at his dolls. Both of you follow me. Doll Inko, use your quirk to pull out the tech from the inside of the robots. Doll Kaken, just blow them up. Feel free to yell too, it'll sound weird otherwise coming from you. Yes, Izuku, they said in unison. Midoriya nodded and led his two dolls into the field. Immediately he spotted two one-pointers approaching. Doll Inko ran ahead and pointed to one before pulling her arm back, wires and gears flying towards her as the robot collapsed. Doll Bakugo on the other hand, simply ran up to the other robot and slammed a hand on it, blowing it into bits, a strong cry of, die, following it. Two down, a bunch more to go. Midoriya whispered to himself. The three of them were a fighting unit, with Midoriya either distracting or defending himself against the robots while his dolls dealt the final blow. Everything seemed to be going well until a thunderous boom shook the arena. Midoriya turned around and almost got knocked over by the stampede of retreating students. Midoriya turned his eyes to the sky and saw exactly what they were running from, the zero-pointer. Midoriya turned to follow the crowd, only stopping when he heard a faint cry for help. He turned and spotted a figure in the rubble. More specifically, the girl from that morning, who was trapped under a large slab of concrete. Throwing caution into the wind, Midoriya ran towards her while giving instructions. Doll Inko, get behind it and start pulling on whatever you can feel inside it to get it to topple. Doll Kaken, stay with me, and when it's about to step on us, I need you to let out the biggest explosion you can underneath its foot to make it fall. Got it, guys? Yes, Izuku, the dolls replied, getting into position. Midoriya, however, crouched down next to the girl. You can do something with gravity, right? He asked. When I touch something with all 5 fingers, yes, but I can't get this off me, she replied, sounding more and more frantic. Normally I'd get some permission, but I don't think I have time. What's your height and weight? Midoriya asked, ignoring her confused expression. Trust me, okay, it'll make sense later. 1.56 meters and 52 kilograms. Midoriya plucked a hair from the girl's head and shut his eyes. Hold on to the strings, he thought to himself. He could feel his connection to his dolls thin out as the strings were pulled harder and harder, but he held on just long enough for the doll of the girl to appear, just as the 0-pointer was getting closer. Lift the slab. Midoriya managed to gasp out, still trying to hold on to his other dolls. The doll nodded and placed her hand on the slab before lifting it up like a feather and tossing it aside. Okay, bye now, Midoriya told the doll as it vanished. Now with the strain gone, Midoriya went over and helped the girl up. Throwing her arm over his shoulder, he led her away just as the 0-pointer was about to step down. What followed next was something Midoriya could barely remember. He felt the strings connecting him to his doll simultaneously strengthen and snap, but Doll Inko pulled one last time right as Doll Bakugo let out the biggest explosion he has ever done. Midoriya stumbled and fell to his knees, bringing the girl down with him. Are you okay? She asked. Just as Midoriya was about to respond, the ground shook once again. He turned and saw the 0-pointer on the ground, surrounded by dust and debris. What shocked him most, however, was his dolls. Midoriya has seen them bruised and battered before, but as they approached, there was something new that he noticed. From their blank, lifeless eyes were black lines as if they were crying ink. You guys are done for today. I'll have Kaken reset your bodies later. Midoriya whispered, watching his dolls disappear. He turned back to the gravity girl, who had a shocked look on her face. She raised one shaky hand up and touched her cheek with it, her eyes not leaving Midoriya's face. He looked at her hand and mimicked her motion, feeling something wet underneath his fingers. He pulled his hand back and saw a black liquid coating his fingertips. That was when he finally let his exhaustion take him. Midoriya woke up to a soft bed and a white ceiling. He took a moment to adjust his eyes to the bright room he was in before sitting up with a groan. Right as he did, though, a rough hand grabbed his shoulder and shoved him back down. He turned to the side to see Bakugo sitting beside his bed, glaring at him. You wake up after an hour and the first thing you want to do is get up? Fing idiot. Bakugo snapped. An hour? Midoriya asked, realizing he was the only patient left. What happened? Looks like some quirk overuse, a voice said. Around the corner came an elderly woman with a clipboard in one hand and a giant syringe cane in the other. One glance at her and Midoriya knew exactly who she was. Recovery girl? He asked. That's me, dear. Now can you fill in the details on what exactly happened on your end? I already know your quirks, so don't worry about that part, she said. Midoriya nodded and explained. I can make up to 2 dolls, but I made a third so I can both take down the 0-pointer and save that girl. It took a heavy toll on me, so having my dolls overuse their quirks was the final straw, I guess. The girl in question told you both you and your dolls looked like you were crying a black liquid out of your eyes. Has that happened before? Recovery girl asked. Never. I was so tired I almost thought it didn't happen. Wait, you took down that huge fucker? It's worth nothing. Bakugo butt in. Kaken, I start bleeding black out of my eyes like an eldritch horror, and that's what you're concerned about? Midoriya asked wearily. You'll get over it. Now that you're awake, go and eat as soon as you can. Recovery girl began. Immediately go see a doctor if this happens again. Thank you, recovery girl. Midoriya said with a smile. He got up and began walking to the door before pausing, realizing that he was in his tracksuit still, and he left his stuff in the change rooms. He turned to tell Bakugo he'd meet him outside, but instead was hit in the face with a yellow blob. He looked down at what he caught and saw his backpack in his hands. Get changed, we're getting food then going home. Bakugo said. Thank you, Kaken. Midoriya cheerfully said. Bakugo scowled at that. Don't think this is for you. The hag texted me that your mom is over and if I come home without you she'd never shut up. Midoriya let out a small laugh as he walked into the bathroom to change. Bakugo's kindness was something he may never get used to even after so many years. Midoriya quickly changes and leaves the UA infirmary with Bakugo not running into anyone else. Soon enough, the topic of the exam came up. So, how many points did you get? Bakugo asked. I got 77. That's amazing, Kaken. Midoriya gushed. I honestly didn't keep track since I was too busy distracting the robots. Your doll did a lot more damage than I was expecting. Of course it did. It's my doll. Even better, I managed to make a third doll, even if it was for a short time. Midoriya said excitedly. So you think you can keep 3 at once soon? Bakugo asked. We won't know until I try again. It needs to be in a controlled environment too. I suspect that the combined strain of putting doll Inko and doll Kaken through so much combat combined with never creating a third doll is the reason why it was so difficult. So if I just dash. A snap in front of his face caused him to snap out of his daze and focus back onto Bakugo's irritated expression. You better not F with anything like that again until we start at UA. If you F up again, I don't have to wait for your dumbass to wake up for an hour. What if we're in the same class again? Midoriya asked eagerly. I doubt that, Deku. We've been in same class for 10 years. Your luck of being near me has got to run out soon enough. The two kept walking, looking for a place to eat, before Midoriya stopped in front of one shop, grabbing Bakugo before he could walk off too far. Bakugo shrugged him off and looked up at the sign. Pizza? He asked. Didn't you get some strict meal plan from that trainer dude? I think after today, we deserve a treat. Midoriya said before dragging him inside. After getting their food and taking a seat, Bakugo looked at Midoriya from across from him, strangely serious. Why did you destroy the 0-pointer? He asked. There was a girl trapped in the rubble and the robot was approaching her. I couldn't just leave her there. Midoriya explained. What about all the points you lost doing that? Midoriya paused, looking down at the food in front of him. I wasn't thinking about points then. My legs moved on their own. All I could think about was making sure she was safe. Bakugo scoffed and shook his head. I'll never effing understand you. Midoriya hoped that one day he will. The day before acceptance letters were expected to be sent out, Midoriya found himself sitting on the sandy shore of Dagoba Beach, watching the sun set over the cleared-up horizon. He noticed that he wasn't the only one there though. Families, couples, and friends were at the beach too, watching the sunset as well. His eyes were drawn to one couple, where the man seemed to be giving a passionate speech to his girlfriend. He watched as the man reached behind him and pulled out a small box, getting down on one knee. The patrons of the beach all watched as the woman burst into tears, nodding so quickly Midoriya worried her neck may break. Beach proposals are always so nice. Especially with a sunset as beautiful as this. A familiar voice said. Midoriya smiled as Yagi sat down next to him, watching the happy couple be congratulated. I'm sorry I haven't been able to see you since your exam. Work has been quite hectic to say the least. Yagi told him. No worries, Yagi-san. You don't need to apologize. Midoriya told him. That won't stop me, my boy. Now tell me, how do you feel about it now that you've had time to think? Midoriya looked down at the sand between his fingers, absent-mindedly playing with it as he picked it up and watched it fall. I think I passed, but that's not what I've been thinking about. There was a point in the exam where I had the option of either getting more points or saving this girl, except I only realized there was a choice when I was talking to Kaken. All I could think about at the moment was saving that girl. It was like my legs moved dash. On their own. Yagi said simultaneously. The blonde smiled at Midoriya's shocked expression. Every hero has that moment, that intuition, that gut feeling where nothing else mattered but the rescue, and if you ask me, Yue would be a fool not to recognize that. Midoriya's shocked expression turned into one of admiration the more Yagi spoke. You have a special way with words, Yagi-san. I guess in a way, it was my first heroic act. That's where you're wrong, my boy. Look at that couple over there and tell me what you see. Yagi said, pointing to the newly engaged couple. Midoriya did not have to stare long, as the answer seemed pretty obvious. They're happy, of course. They're starting a new chapter of their life together. Do you remember what you told me when you finished clearing this beach? Yagi began. You said that everyone would be able to enjoy themselves again. That couple right there just started a new chapter of their life right here on this beautiful beach, all because of you. They may not know it, but in a way, you are their hero. I find it quite wonderful how, oh my boy, don't cry. Did I say something wrong? Midoriya wrapped his arms around Yagi's thin figure, basking in the tight grip that he returned. No, Yagi-san, you said everything right. Midoriya leaned against the shut door of his room, looking at the letter in his hands as he tried to calm his nerves. He had a good chance of passing, so why was he so nervous to open it? It took another 10 minutes for him to finally psych himself enough to tear the seal off the letter. From it fell a small circular disc that fell onto his desk. The light on it flickered before brightly lighting up and projecting a video of All Might of all people. I am here as a projection, it exclaimed. Midoriya Izuku, you passed the written exams with flying colors, falling into the top 10 of our examinees. As for your practical exam, you scored a total of 30 villain points, just under the cutoff for acceptance. Midoriya's heart plummeted hearing those words. All that work, all that time, for nothing. But wait, look right here. All Might said, gesturing to the screen behind him. The video switched to a conversation between the girl from the exam and present Mike. Excuse me. There was a boy at the exams with curly green hair, freckles, kind of plain looking. Can I give him some of my points? What? Midoriya nearly shrieked. He risked not getting any points, took down that 0-pointer, all for me. That boy, he saved my life. Midoriya sat in shock over this stranger's words. She wanted to give some of her own hard-earned points to him of all people? Being a hero isn't just about taking down villains. Yue would be a fool not to recognize actions such as your own, which is why we are awarding you 50 rescue points. As for Miss Uraraka Ochako, she will be gaining 45 rescue points. Come now, Midoriya, this will be your hero academy. The tears that were threatening to leak through burst out at full force. Midoriya, I'll be at your house in 5 minutes. Kaken, underscore, I'm on the subway, dumbass. Midoriya, what? Kaken, underscore, after the entrance exams I'm not waiting for your butt again. Midoriya, snake. Kaken, underscore, when did you get a mouth on you? Midoriya, 2 seconds ago when my best friend abandoned me. Reads 7:45 a.m. Midoriya huffed and put his phone back in his pocket, turning left towards the station instead of right towards the Bakugu residence. He was hoping to arrive at UA with Bakugu, but it seemed like he had other plans in mind, most likely because Midoriya beat him for first place by 3 points. He arrived at the station just in time to catch his ride. He sat down in his seat and tapped his foot in anticipation. It was really happening. He was going to UA. He thought back to earlier in the morning when his mother gave him a tight hug and wished him good luck, and to when Yagi texted him words of encouragement for his first day. He got off at his stop feeling a little less nervous, but he could feel his fingers unconsciously tapping against his leg as he walked to UA. This is stupid, he thought. I have class with Kaken. Everything will be fine. He thought about what he said for a moment. Okay, everything will be sort of fine. Turns out, his first issue wasn't any class problems, but finding his class in the first place. Midoriya began to wonder if UA was safe from villain attacks not because of the security, but because of how easy it was to get lost. After 10 minutes of mindless wandering, he finally found the giant door labeled 1A. He took a deep breath, realizing he was literally stepping into his future, and entered his class. Remove your foot from that desk this instant. It is an insult to those students who came before us as well as the craftsmen of this desk. You think I care? Where the hell are you coming from anyways, extra? Midoriya forgot about them. I'm Ida Tenya from SammyD Private Academy, the boy with the glasses said. SammyD? So you're just some stuck-up elitist, huh? Bakugo shot back. Midoriya sighed, realizing this may get ugly. Kaken, if you're going to pick a fight, can it at least not be before class? The two boys looked up at Midoriya, who was awkwardly standing in the doorway. Bakugo scoffed and looked off to the side, not replying to Midoriya. As for Ida, he quickly rushed over to Midoriya, towering over him. My name is Ida Tenya from SammyD. Yes, I heard. I'm Midoriya Izuku, it's nice to meet you, Midoriya said nervously. Was he about to get chewed out again? Midoriya, I misjudged you. Wait, what? You saw the true meaning of the exam while I didn't, and for that I apologize. Midoriya opened his mouth, unable to form a coherent sentence for Ida. Suddenly, a voice popped up from behind him. Curly hair. Midoriya turned around to see the girl from the entrance exam behind him, Uraraka, his mind supplied. You got in, just like Present Mike said. Ahaha. Midoriya began, not knowing what to do. I have you to thank for, speaking on my behalf and all. If you're here to socialize, then get out, a voice from the doorway said. Midoriya and Uraraka turned to look at the door, seeing no one standing there. On the ground, however, was a yellow lump that Midoriya realizes is a sleeping bag zipped all the way up, only showing the man's face who seems to drinking a juice pouch. Midoriya and Uraraka quickly head to their seats, Ida following close behind. The man entered the class and removed the sleeping bag, looking over the class with tired eyes. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is a precious resource here and you all don't seem quite rational. I'm your homeroom teacher, Aizawa Shoyuda. He reached inside his sleeping bag and pulled out a blue tracksuit. Put on your GM uniform and meet me outside on the grounds. Aizawa turned and left, leaving a stunned class behind him. As they all quickly headed to the change rooms, Midoriya walked over to Bakugo. Do you recognize him? He asked. If he's a staff member then he must be a pro, right? Bakugo shrugged. Never seen him before. Didn't think UA hired random hobos. Kaken. Midoriya scolded, although it didn't really do anything. 1A made their way onto the field, where Aizawa was standing and waiting for them. Today you'll be doing a quirk apprehension test, he began. What about the entrance ceremony? Uraraka asked. We don't have time to waste on that if you really want to become heroes. UA's freestyle education applies to teachers as well. He turned and scanned the crowd, his eyes landing on a figure right next to Midoriya. Bakugo, how far could you throw in middle school? 67 meters, he replied. Now try again but with your quirk. Aizawa said, tossing the ball to Bakugo. Bakugo grinned as his grip tightened around the ball. He shifted his stance and let the ball fly with his explosion, throwing in a die, for good measure. The machine Aizawa was holding beeped, and he held it out, revealing a 705.2M written on it. The first step in becoming heroes is to find our limits. The class all turned to each other excitedly, talking about how much fun it will be. Unfortunately, that caught Aizawa's attention. Fun, you say? How about this then? The person with the lowest score will be judged hopeless and will be expelled from UA. He was immediately met with protests from the rest of the class, but they were all shut down. Midoriya wringed his hands nervously. Together. I can't fail. The class walked over to the track was for the 50-meter dash. As everyone began stretching and warming up, Midoriya opened up both his lockets and soon enough, Doll Inko and Doll Bakugo were standing in front of him. Have you still not FNG changed it? Bakugo said angrily, looking at the middle school uniform Doll Bakugo was wearing. The dolls bulked up a bit from when it was first made, so I'm surprised the uniform still fits. Besides, none of my clothes will fit it, you're too big. Midoriya replied. When the dolls are resummoned, they keep whatever they were wearing when they were summoned away, and Midoriya has never bothered to change them, so Doll Inko was in a t-shirt and jeans while Doll Bakugo was in the middle school uniform. Whoa, what is that? A boy with blonde hair and a black streak said as he approached the two dolls. That's my quirk. It's called Dollmaker. Midoriya began, not noticing the crowd that was forming. As long as I know someone's height, weight, and I have a piece of their DNA, I can make a doll version of them. The doll's attributes include dash. We're not doing this. Bakugo interrupted, covering Midoriya's mouth and stopping the incoming rant. You extras can interrogate him when I'm far away from his DM and mumbling. Before anyone could argue back, Aizawa called the first pair over to run. Midoriya looked at his two dolls, thinking of how to do his best in the race with them. He looked at the blank eyes of his mother's doll and smiled, before whispering the command into its ear. The doll nodded at Izuku and waited for it to be their turn. Bakugo and Midoriya, you're up. Aizawa called out. Midoriya turned to his two dolls. Doll Kaken, stay here until I'm done. Doll Inko, do the plan I just told you. Yes, Izuku, the dolls said in unison. As Doll Inko and Midoriya walked off, he heard the pink girl whisper, well, that was creepy, to her friend. Midoriya and Bakugo stood side by side at the beginning of the track while Doll Inko stood at the end, its arm outstretched. When Aizawa's countdown reached 0, Bakugo blasted off, but what was surprising was seeing Midoriya not too far behind, flying next to him with the front of shirt being pulled by something invisible. Bakugo crossed the finish line first, with Midoriya close behind. 4.13 seconds. 5.25 seconds. The machine beeped out. Your mom can only attract small objects and the doll's quirks are weaker. I know you're short as sheet but you don't look like a small object. Bakugo stated. My shirt counts as a small object though. Midoriya explained. Bakugo looked down at Midoriya with an almost impressed look in his eyes before walking off. Midoriya's dolls approached him and Midoriya turned to Doll Inko. Did that take too much out of you? He asked. He knew it didn't, but the exam incident still worried him. Not at all, Izuku. I can use my quirk on things far larger than a shirt after all. Doll Inko replied with a smile. She kind of looks like you. Uraraka said, with other classmates close behind and watching. We'd look more alike if it had her eyes. This is a doll of my mom. Midoriya explained. Does your mother know that you use her doll for training? Ida asked. Midoriya quickly nodded. I don't make dolls unless I have permission or if it's an emergency. He said, looking to Uraraka at that last part. I really only ever use these two dolls, and I've been training them since I was 12. Training? A red-haired boy asked. When a doll is made, it is made with a weaker version of the original's quirk. Kaken's doll, for example, could barely make a spark. I would always try and make the dolls stronger, but when they were summoned again, they would go back to being weak. When I was 12, I realized that as long as I used the same piece of DNA to make the dolls, the progress would stay, which is why I have a 2-year-old strand of my mom's and Kaken's hair in these lockets, he said, pulling the lockets out from under his shirt. All done, let's move on to the next one. Aizawa announced, leading everyone to the next station. Midoriya's dolls followed and assisted when they could, although Midoriya had to do some things like the grip strength and the side-to-side stepping himself, which were detrimental to his score. By the time the softball pitch arrived, Midoriya knew he had to either push it or face expulsion. Midoriya watched everyone go, being impressed by the display of quirks. One girl created a cannon to shoot the ball out of, while one guy shot the ball with a laser from his stomach, but by far the most impressive was Uraraka's infinity score. Midoriya, you're up, Aizawa said, handing the ball to him. Midoriya turned to where the class was and pointed to Doll Baku. Stand in the circle and throw the ball as hard as you can with your quirk. I need you to push it, got it? Got it, Izuku. Do I say eh too? The doll replied. Why not? Midoriya answered. He took a few steps back and watched the doll wind up its pitch. Right as the ball was thrown, Midoriya felt it. It wasn't like when he tried to summon 3 dolls, or summoned one away. Those were when his threads were pulled too hard and snapped. This feeling was different. It was like someone took his thread and cut it with scissors. He stumbled back in surprise, not expecting this new feeling, and watched Doll Bakugo disappear. When his dolls disappeared, either by being summoned away or dying, it was like mist in the air, being blown away piece by piece. Right now, however, Doll Bakugo seemed to almost glitch like a computer before disappearing in the blink of an eye. Midoriya looked around in confusion and found his answers in red eyes, levitating hair, yellow goggles, and a floating scarf. "You're Eraserhead," he said in awe. "I am, and you were just about to overuse your quirk and incapacitate yourself again, just like at the entrance exams, weren't you?" Aizawa said, walking towards him. "And no, I just Midoriya began. "Whatever you were planning was just going to cause an inconvenience to everyone here." Aizawa interrupted, wrapping Midoriya up in his capture weapon. "You've got a reckless streak like someone I know, but after one rescue, you're done for." Aizawa blinked, allowing for Midoriya's dolls to reappear again. "You've got one more try." Midoriya looked at Doll Bakugo, who was holding the ball, and stopped it. "Wait, follow me." The two walked over to where Uraraka, Bakugo, Ida, and Doll Inko were standing. Midoriya turned to Uraraka. "Does your quirk's effect have to do with the item's weight or the distance it travels?" he asked. "The weight of it. That's why the ball was no sweat," she replied. "Can I make a doll of you?" Midoriya asked. Surprisingly, Uraraka let out a small giggle and nodded, plucking a hair from her head and handing it to Midoriya. Bakugo looked at the exchange and took a step towards Doll Bakugo, his hands crackling. "Two at a time, fucker. Kakin, it's fine. You don't have to destroy one. It'll just disappear when I make the new doll, remember?" Midoriya said, slightly panicked. "I do, but I don't like how it looks at me." Bakugo growled, looking at the doll. "What look?" one of the students whispered in confusion. Midoriya took the hair and recalled the information Uraraka told him the day of the entrance exams, and soon enough, a replica of Uraraka in the UA gym uniform was right where Doll Bakugo used to stand. Midoriya handed the doll the ball. "Go stand in that circle, use your quirk on the ball, and throw it upwards," he instructed. "Sure thing, Izuku." Doll Uraraka said, doing just that. The class looked to Aizawa, who turned the machine around to show to infinity on the screen. Now that is over, here are the results. A projection appeared from Aizawa's tablet, showing a list of the students with their rankings, and Midoriya breathed a sigh of relief to see himself in 7th place. Originally, the promise of expulsion was going to be a logical ruse to bring out the best in your abilities, but the plan seems to have changed. "Mineta, your behavior is not fitting of a hero. Go pack your things," Aizawa said, staring down one small, purple-haired student. Aizawa paid no mind to his protests, and Midoriya noticed how the girls did not look as sympathetic as he thought, and he can only imagine what the behavior was. As the class walked to go change, Midoriya turned to his dolls. "You guys did great today. Shame I can't tell Doll Kakin, but anyways, your work here is done," he smiled, watching them disappear. "In the future, if you're going to waste time watching, at least power down so you don't waste your limit, All Might," Aizawa said, approaching the hero's hiding spot. All Might simply smiled at the hero. "Last year you expelled an entire class of first years, and yet today, you walk away with only one gone. I expel those with 0 potential. They all had more than 0. Aizawa said tiredly. "That means you say potential in the boy, Midoriya, as well, yes?" "As well. I won't ask about those implications, but if he had no prospects, then I would have cut him loose. There's nothing worse than letting someone chase a half-baked dream. All I'll say is that the kid doesn't have no chance," Aizawa said as he walked away. All Might smiled before looking around. Seeing that there was no one nearby, he powered down and followed Aizawa into the school, pestering him with questions. "Can you make more than 2 dolls at once? Does it have to be hair? Can you change its appearance? No, because one always disappears if I try. No, it can be any DNA, and yes, but if it's destroyed, it's reset to what it looked like when it was first made," Midoriya replied. The questions about his quirk seemed to annoy Bakugo, but Midoriya couldn't be more happy that classmates were showing interest for once. The questions didn't last long though, as Bakugo eventually dragged him out of the class to go home. "Why though? You came to school without me," Midoriya said. "You're coming over to grab clothes for the doll. I refuse to let it walk around in that ugly but uniform," Bakugo said as they walked the halls. Turning a corner, 2 people were walking ahead of them, and the hair and figure of one of them was far too recognizable to Midoriya. "Yagi-san." The two people paused and turned around, revealing themselves to be Aizawa and Yagi, both of whom looked surprised. Hold on? This is your FING mystery trainer? You told me he taught you how to fight, but a slight breeze could knock him over. Bakugo said in disbelief. Don't be rude, Kaken. Midoriya whispered before turning to Yagi. What are you doing here? Oh, Midoriya. I was wondering when I would run into you. A surprise? Yagi said, nervously. Wait, you work here? Midoriya asked. I thought the only new staff member was All Might. I'm not a teacher, but I am working here. I work as All Might's assistant. Yagi explained, avoiding Aizawa's glare. Midoriya thought for a moment before smiling. That explains how much you knew about heroics. I'm glad I get to see you around. You too, my boy. Yagi said, smiling back. As riveting as this reunion is, Yagi and I must head to the staff room. Aizawa finally said, head home safe, you two. The two boys nodded and continued walking down the hall. Aizawa watched them get out of earshot before saying, I'm guessing that explains the as well? All Might blushed as he turned to finally meet Aizawa's eye. He's a lovely young boy. Of course my new problem student was trained by you. I didn't think I was so spot on when I told him his recklessness reminded me of you. All Might ignored the biting comment in favor of blushing even more. He reminds you of me? Aizawa walked off towards the staff room without him. After the event of yesterday, the next morning at UA was like whiplash. Going from an intense test to sitting and learning about classical literature. By the time lunch came around, Midoriya could hardly sit still in his seat, much to the displeasure of Bakugo. If I see that leg shake one more time, I will remove your kneecaps, he growled over his food. Midoriya gave him a sheepish grin before turning to Uraraka and Ida, who approached the duo's table. Would it be all right if we sat with you guys? Uraraka asked. Bakugo gave a nondescript grunt as Midoriya pulled out a chair for the two of them to sit in. As they placed their food down, two more chairs by Bakugo were quickly filled as the red-haired boy and pink-skinned girl from their class joined them. You guys excited for All Might's lesson today? The girl, Ashido, said as she ignored the glare Bakugo was sending her and Kirishima for suddenly joining. Who isn't? Uraraka replied. As the number one hero, his years of experience will be quite beneficial to our learning. Ida added. Let's just hope he's not as intense as Aizawa. Kirishima said with a sigh. Yesterday was terrifying. It was cool seeing everyone's quirks though. Your idea for the ball throw was great, Deku. Uraraka said to Midoriya. Immediately, Bakugo's head snapped up as he scowled at Uraraka. What the F, did you just call him? Deku? His name. Midoriya jumped into the conversation before any more escalations could occur. Deku is just something Kaken calls me. It started out as something mean about my quirk when we were 12, but now it would just be weird to be called anything else. Oh really? I thought it was like for Deku, since you give off that you can do it vibe. Uraraka said. Midoriya's face matched Kirishima's hair as he squeaked out, you can call me Deku too. Just like that? Both Ida and Bakugo said in shock. Bakugo huffed and turned to face Kirishima and Ashido instead, having enough of the mushy moment. Soon enough, lunch ended and Class 1A sat impatiently as they waited for their teacher to enter. Not a second later, the door burst open and in came All Might in all his glory. I have come through the door, like normal. The class quietly chattered amongst themselves as All Might walked to the front of the room. Hero Basic Training. This class will give you the training to mold you into heroes, and today will be some good old-fashioned battle training. Midoriya thought his heart might give out by how excited he was. All Might clicked a button on the remote he was holding, triggering parts of the walls of the class to come forward and reveal 19 cases. For battle, you will be needing these. Costumes, the class cheered. All Might held the door open as the class rushed to get their case. Get changed and meet me at ground beta. 1A hurried to the change rooms to get into costume as soon as possible. Midoriya set his case down and smiled at what he saw. Everything looked perfect. Matching the puppeteer aesthetic his quirk had, his costume had a showman's flair to it. His black dress pants were reinforced with armor in order to protect him. As for his top half, He wore a silk black dress shirt with a large silk black tie, also armored. Over that was a deep green vest with golden buttons and chains. Over top that was a black blazer with a plastic green rose pinned on his left side. To literally top it all off, Midoriya smiled as he put the black top hat on his head, a similar deep green rose off-center and pinned to the bottom of it. The whole outfit was both strong for defense but easy to move around in. He picked up his matching cane, black with an emerald at the top of it, and headed out the door. Bakugo was the first person to see him, and he held back a laugh as he took in Midoriya's ensemble. This is a hero school, not a circus. Strong words coming from someone who has a butterfly on the back of his head. Midoriya shot back, dodging the shove Bakugo sent his way. He was then approached by Uraraka, who was excitedly taking his costume in. "You sure look fancy, Deku," she said. Midoriya smiled back at her and examined her costume. "I like yours too. The astronaut theme fits you perfectly." The chatter died down as All Might called everyone over to him and explained the exercise. Midoriya walked over to All Might to find out who his teammate would be. He looked around, hoping the other member of Team A would approach him, and luckily she did. "This must be fate," Uraraka said cheerfully, holding out her matching slip. "Now for the first match we have," All Might began, reaching into the boxes. "Team D as villains and Team G as heroes. We're going to die," someone behind Midoriya whispered. He turned around to see the blonde boy who was asking about his quirk yesterday standing next to the girl with the earphone jack ears, both of them holding a slip of paper with the letter G on it. They were looking towards Bakugo and his partner, a tall girl with a ponytail and red and yellow costume. "I appreciate the optimism," Jairu snarkily whispered back to Kaminari. "I think you'd agree that if they both kicked our butts, we'd say thank you, but I don't feel like being hospitalized after our first lesson by two people who ranked in the top yesterday." Jaira looked like she wanted to disagree, but she ended up shrugging and walking up to All Might to accept the blueprints he was handing out. Midoriya looked from Kaminari's nervous expression to Bakugo's bloodthirsty glare. Hopefully Yaoyorozu could rein him in. "You stay here and defend while I go deal with those Fs." "Oh, okay." Bakugo exited the room they planted the fake bomb in, leaving Yaoyorozu to her own devices. Bakugo stormed down the flight of stairs, throwing all subtlety and stealth out the window, and by the time he reached the third floor, Jairu and Kaminari were waiting for him to fight. "For the future, you should probably be a bit quieter if you want to get the jump on a girl with the hearing quirk." Bakugo smirked. "That's assuming I need to get the jump on you." With that, Bakugo charged forward, causing Kaminari and Jairu to dive out of the way. Back in the observation booth, 15 students simultaneously winced as they watched Bakugo attack. "It's not looking so good for Jairu and Kaminari," Ashido said, watching the fight continue. "Kaminari is landing some hits, but it's not slowing Bakugo down." Hagakure added, "Kaken's fighting style is close and medium-range combat, and I'm guessing Kaminari's is too." Midoriya began muttering. "But in terms of raw power, Kaken has the upper hand." "I'm not 100% sure, but judging by what I'm seeing, Jairu seems to work better as mid-range support." "That sounds very interesting, Midoriya," Ida said, snapping Midoriya out of his trance. "I did not pick up on that." "Oh well, this is all just speculation," Midoriya said, now embarrassed. "It's only been 5 minutes and dash. Still, you managed to get a lot of information in such a short PRD of time. That is quite a useful skill to have." All Might interrupted, giving Midoriya a blinding smile before turning back to the monitors. Midoriya checked his pulse to make sure he was still alive. "Wait, what are they doing?" Uraraka asked. Midoriya looked back at the monitors to see Kaminari shoving Jairu towards the stairs, leaving him alone with Bakugo. "He's sending her to find the bomb and Yaoyorozu," Tokoyami said, "although I don't know if facing off alone with Bakugo is a smart idea." It really wasn't. Without his support, Kaminari was taken down 3 minutes later after overusing his quirk, leaving Bakugo to search for Jairu. "Looks like he's going to take her down quick," Hagakure said. "I don't think it's Bakugo she has to worry about," Azui suddenly said, pointing to one of the monitors. With the big fight distracting everyone, no one seemed to look at what Yaoyorozu was up to. The room somehow turned into a video game level with all the traps set up, with Yaoyorozu in the center of the room like the final boss. Jiraiya opened the door and stepped inside, her earphones prepared to strike. She barely made it 2 steps into the room before she nearly fell to her knees, clutching her ears painfully. In that moment of hesitation, Yaoyorozu surged forward with the capture tape and wrapped it around Jiraiya's torso while she was distracted. "Villains win," All Might announced. Yaoyorozu had a bright smile on her face, while Bakugo paused in his search, looking confused. Bakugo, Yaoyorozu, Jiraiya, and Kaminari, now back to normal, all entered the room a few minutes later. "Now can anyone tell me who the MVP was?" All Might asked. The class was silent for a moment, and as Midoriya was about to open his mouth, another voice spoke. "Yaoyorozu." Midoriya turned around to see Todoroki standing by the wall, silencing daring anyone to disagree. "Young Todoroki is right." All Might agreed. While Bakugo was about to stand a 2-on-1 attack, young Yaoyorozu was able to adapt and create the perfect trap for the heroes. "What was it that you did to Jiraiya anyways?" Ashido asked. Yaoyorozu was surprised at the praise thrown her way, but recovered and turned to Ashido. There was a tripwire at the door to activate a speaker from above. The loud noise disoriented Jiraiya long enough for me to capture her. "What if it was me at the door?" Kaminari asked. "The noise wouldn't affect you as severely, but it would distract you long enough for me to make this." From the space between her crop top and shorts, Yaoyorozu pulled out a large, rectangular object. "I would use this rubber shield for protection while I try to capture you in my other traps." Nothing less from one of the recommended student. Uraraka whispered as nearly everyone clamored around her. "On to the next round." All Might announced. Team J as villains and Team A as heroes. "Our turn now. I wonder who we're up against?" Uraraka asked. "That would be us." Midoriya turned and saw Ida and Kirishima standing next to each other. "I hope for a good round," Kirishima said with a thumbs up. 5 minutes later, Uraraka, Midoriya, and his 2 dolls, Doll Bakugo now wearing a different outfit, were standing in front of the building. "Uraraka, are you able to use your quirk on yourself to see where they are through the windows?" Midoriya asked, pointing up at the buildings. "I can do it." Uraraka nodded. She activated her quirk and began rising, holding onto the window ledges so she wouldn't fly away. At one point, she ducked her head under the window and began using the ledges to bring herself down. "Ida is on the 5th floor with the bomb," she said as she reached the ground. "I saw Kirishima sneaking around on the 4th floor and talking on the comms. I think he's looking for us but isn't going to fight us alone. Then one of us should keep him separated while the other goes after Ida." Midoriya decided. He turned to Doll Inko and said, "Until we're back in the observation room or you are gone, you are to obey the commands of Uraraka Ochako too." "Yes, Izuku." "Yes, Ochako." Doll Inko said. "You can do that?" Uraraka said in surprise. "I don't do it often, but since they all follow my commands, I can command them to follow other commands." Midoriya explained. "Do you want to deal with Kirishima or Ida?" "Kirishima seems more like the fighting type, and I saw you deal with some of those robots during the exam, so I think you should deal with him. Besides, I have an idea on how to distract Ida." "Sounds good to me. It'll let me test out this baby," Midoriya said as he held his cane out. "Let's go." It didn't take long to find Kirishima, as he was looking for them. When he saw the 4 of them approach, he moved his hand towards the comm. "Doll Inko, use your quirk on his comm." Uraraka shouted. The doll stretched its hand out towards Kirishima and pulled, the comm flying out of his ear and into its hand. Kirishima looked at the doll in shock before shifting into a fighting stance. "You guys may be able to take some hits, but those dolls can't. Uraraka, go on ahead." Midoriya said to her. "Go for the bomb." Uraraka nodded and raced off, leaving Midoriya and Doll Bakugo alone with Kirishima. "Doll Kaken," Midoriya began. "Go." That was all the prompting the doll needed as it sprinted forward to face Kirishima, hands crackling and expression merciless. Kirishima ran forward to meet the doll in the middle, activating his quirk just as the doll yelled, "Die." and attacked. When the smoke cleared, Kirishima was left unscathed by the hit. Hardened skin, a perfect foil for Kaken. Midoriya whispered to himself. But even rocks crack eventually. Midoriya lifted his cane in front of him and clicked the small button below the jewel. The cane grew until it was 6 feet long, and Kirishima watched as Midoriya twirled it around before slamming it into the ground. "Is that a bow staff?" Kirishima asked in shock. "That's pretty manly." "Thank you. Now let's wrap this up so one of us can help our teammate." Midoriya replied. As he and Dollmaker charged forwards, he hoped he could hold off Kirishima long enough for Uraraka's plan to work. "You remember what I told you?" Uraraka said to Inko as they approached the door to the room Ida was in. "I never forget anything unless I am remade, no need to worry." Inko replied. "Remade? You mean when you're destroyed?" "No, being remade refers to when me or any of Izuku's dolls are made with a new piece of DNA. If he loses Inko's hair strand and has to use a new one, I'll lose all training and memories from the past 3 years. It is why he is quite protective of his lockets." "That must be a lot of pressure." Uraraka mused. When the two stopped at the door, Uraraka moved behind Inko and nodded. "Go ahead." Inko opened the door and stepped inside the room, getting Ida's attention. "Halt, hero. That will be the last steps you will be taking." As Ida continued his villainous monologue, Uraraka quickly hid behind one of the pillars in the room. She looked around realizing that the room was completely empty. "I thought that the doll of Uraraka or Inko would come here, which is why I completely emptied the room," Ida announced. "And now, I will be taking care of you, foolish doll." Ida rushed forward using his quirk, but as he was about to send a kick towards the doll, it lifted its arms up in front of its face and winced. "Please don't hurt a poor mother like me," it pleaded, causing Ida to pause. He lifted his leg to attack but hesitated and put it down, the morals of attacking a copy of his friend's mom weighing heavily on him. Inko lifted its head and saw the hesitation in Ida's eyes. "Gotcha, villain," it winked. It stretched its arms out and pulled, the armored pieces of Ida's costume pulling Ida and flinging him against the wall. Inko ran to the bomb and put their hand on it, but Uraraka heard no announcement from All Might. "Inko, pull me!" Uraraka shouted. She felt the front of her shirt move and quickly activated her quirk on herself to make it easier. It did make it easier, too easy. Uraraka essentially flew towards the bomb and grabbed in a sloth-like grasp, causing it to float. The momentum from Inko's quirk was still in effect however, and she ended up slamming her face against the wall. "Heroes win," All Might announced. Back downstairs, Kirishima and Midoriya backed off from each other, and Midoriya had to grab Dollmaker to stop it from continuing to fight. With the dolls gone, the 4 of them made their way back into the observation room, Uraraka sporting a giant smile and bloody nose. "How the F did you learn to use that?" Bakugo growled, pointing to Midoriya's staff. "You know how I was cleaning the beach? I found a giant stick there and Yagi-san was telling me about how an old friend of his who's a hero with a non-combative quirk knows how to use some weapons. Yagi-san ended up teaching me a thing or two," Midoriya explained, not noticing All Might trying to cover up his cough. "Did you pick up his twig butt and swing him around as practice?" "Kaken." After class was over, and Uraraka was sent to Recovery Girl, Midoriya was exiting the school with Bakugo, Uraraka, Ida, Kirishima, and Ashido, both of whom seemed to have decided that Bakugo was their new friend. As they walked the halls, they ran into Yagi and Present Mike, who were discussing something with one another. "Oh, Midoriya," Yagi said when he noticed the group. "I'm going to be 10 minutes late today. I'm finishing up something for All Might." "That's all right," Midoriya replied. Behind him, Bakugo noticed the confused look on Present Mike's face. "You can tell me how your lesson with All Might went today. He told me how you put my staff lessons to good use. He was so manly when he was fighting me," Kirishima exclaimed. "Everyone watching was so surprised when your cane transformed." Ashido added, "You should ask All Might about it all, especially Ida's predicament." Uraraka teased, much to the displeasure of Ida. "My moment of hesitation was my downfall." Ida said sadly. Hey, it's cool man. No one wants to kick a mom. Kirishima said. Hey, Bakugo said to Yagi. To learn how to use the staff, did Deku pick you dash? Wow, we have to get going now, so by Mike-sensei, by Yagi-san. Midoriya hurriedly exclaimed, dragging Bakugo down the hall before he could finish his question. As the two teachers watched the students all leave, Mike turned to All Might and laughed. How do you know Midoriya? As in Yagi, not All Might. I met him about a year ago and supervised his as he cleaned up Dagoba Beach. All Might explained. That was him? No wonder the tiny kid is built as hell. He took one of All Might's suggestions when he met me in that form. As he cleaned, I also taught him how to fight and ended up becoming acquainted with him. So you trained him? Mike asked. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. All Might denied. So why are you meeting up with him today? To do some tear dash, All Might cut himself off, glaring at Mick's sheet-eating grin before huffing and turning away towards the staff room. Oh come on you big goof. By the way, has he used his quirk on you yet? Mike asked, following him. It was never brought up. He said he would feel guilty if he made one without someone's permission. All Might replied. If he did, would the doll be in your buff form or this form? All Might paused and thought about it for a moment before sighing. I hope the boy doesn't find out. So then Uraraka had doll Inko use its quirk to bring Uraraka to the bomb, and that's how we won. Midoriya finished explaining. Yagi watched the proud look on his face as he continued eating his ice cream and walked along with him. Sounds like quite the event. It's a shame I can't watch your training. Yagi replied. I'm sure you can get the video if you ask All Might or Aizawa-sensei. I might just do that. I can see how well you used your staff and see if I need to knock you down a few pegs before you get cocky. Yagi teased, poking Midoriya's side and getting a laugh out of him. Using your cane as a staff is a smart idea. Was the rest of your costume what you expected? Everything down to the color coordination. Midoriya gushed. It's mostly black and green with gold buttons, chains, and my golden lockets, he said, patting his chest to where the lockets were hidden under his shirt. As they approached a park bench, Yagi paused for a moment and turned to Midoriya, the two of them taking a seat. I know you've only had your mother and friends' dolls all this time, but with a class of 18 others, you're bound to get more, and all those lockets seem like a hassle. Yagi watched as Midoriya's face turned from contemplative to, surprisingly, pained. Midoriya turned the ice cream cone in his hand, not looking up towards Yagi. I haven't really put any thought into getting other dolls. I've always worked under the assumption that no one wants to give me the option of asking. It's always been a no. Yagi could feel his heart crack at that response, making a sudden realization. The two never spoke about anything personal since meeting. The only information known was shared through anecdotes while training, so it was a surprise to hear how vulnerable Midoriya sounded in that moment. So surprising, in fact, that he had to cover his mouth before blood started spewing. Like muscle memory, Midoriya was already pressing a handkerchief in his hands. I'm sorry to startle you like that. Midoriya quickly apologized. Yagi wiped his mouth and shook his head. No, never apologize for that, he responded. He set the napkin down and turned to look into Midoriya's eyes, keeping a tight grip on his shoulder. This isn't your old school, and this isn't the life you once thought you were stuck with. I want you to keep those two close to your heart, since they're the ones who started it all, he said, poking the lockets on his chest. But I also hope that you will realize that at UA, while it is true that everyone is reaching for the same goal, no one would dare leave you of all people behind with no support. I'm not the most sure on that. The boy you call Kaken, you once told me he will stop at nothing to be number one, but he not only provided you with access to his doll, but also gave you the wake-up call years ago to set you on the path to UA. He may be a tad volatile, but if he of all people are willing to set you on the right path, then I'm sure your classmates will be happy to help. Yagi only saw the tears in Midoriya's eyes for a second before he launched himself forward to embrace Yagi in a hug. Now used to the surprising amount of tears the boy had, he pet his hair and smiled, ignoring the pain in his side from the tight grip. When Midoriya finally pulled away, his red-rimmed eyes had more light to it than before. You're far too kind, Yagi-san, he blushed. And you're far too deserving of it. Yagi replied, wiping more blood away as he spoke, unconsciously bringing his hand to his side. I know you've told me that you're sick, but is that all? Midoriya asked hesitantly, looking at Yagi's shaking hand. The two held eye contact for a moment before Yagi let out a boisterous laugh. My boy, you are far too caring and worried. Now before I forget, I have an idea about the DNA collection you're going to have soon. Midoriya listened closely to Yagi's idea, chiming in with information of his own, ignoring the pressing thought in the back of his mind. That wasn't a no. Ashido, this is going to sound really weird but dash. Here you go Midori. Heard you explaining it to some people earlier. Midoriya sighed in relief as he took the pink hair from the girl. Getting to school was tough with dealing with the reporters and dealing with Bakugo dealing with the reporters, but he was happy he got there on time. Homeroom hadn't even started yet and he already managed to get a strand of hair from nearly everyone in the class except for two. With no hair, Kuda couldn't be used in this specific plan, but he had told Midoriya he could come to him for a doll when needed. As for Todoroki, Midoriya noticed his discomfort before he even approached him, causing him not to ask. So now Midoriya had 15 strands of hair all in a plastic bag in his pocket, waiting to be delivered into Power Loader's nimble fingers along with a list of heights and weights in his backpack, waiting to be memorized. His two lockets felt heavier on his chest since yesterday, as if the weight of Yagi's words were put into the lockets. Keep those two close to your heart, he had said. Midoriya intended to do just that. For today's homeroom, Aizawa began, putting everyone on the edge of their seats. You're picking a class rep. Wake me when it is decided. With that, the class fell into chaos just as quickly as Aizawa fell into his sleeping bag. After many interjections and one conversation later, 1A sat in their seats and began voting for who would be class rep. Midoriya poked Bakugo and leaned forward to whisper to him. You better not be voting for yourself. Bakugo scoffed and leaned back in his chair to whisper back. And what if I am? Oh come on Kaken, this is one of the few times we can help a classmate out. Midoriya said, remembering Yagi's words from the previous day. You're doing a shit job trying to convince me. You won't have time for this and you'll end up working with someone like Ida. Midoriya said, deadpanned. Bakugo scoffed and went back to his sheet of paper. Although he said nothing, Midoriya was confident his words stuck with him. He looked back down at his paper, happily writing Ida down on it. By the end of homeroom, everyone looked at the board in anticipation. How did I get 3 votes? Who the F gave Deku 3 votes? Midoriya couldn't believe he got a single vote, much less enough to tie with Yaoyorozu of all people. Both of you figure out who will be rep and vice rep by the end of the day. That is all. With homeroom over and the class filing out, Midoriya walked over to Aizawa. So this will sound weird but it's important to my quirk but anyways, I've been asking the class for strands of their hair along with their height and weight so I can have an emergency backup plan and I was wondering if maybe I can also have one of your hairs? I understand if not but dash. Yeah okay. Aizawa interrupted. He handed Midoriya a strand of hair while taking his notebook with the other to write down his height and weight. It's good to have a backup plan, he said, handing the notebook back to Midoriya. Just as he did that, Midnight walked through the door, holding 2 cups of coffee. As she handed one to Aizawa, she noticed the hair that Midoriya was holding. I heard you asking Aoyama and Azui in the hallway for a hair. Weird way to flirt if I'm being honest. Midoriya's face was red as he sputtered out a response. No, not at all. It's for my quirk. Midnight set her cup down and smiled at Midoriya. Your quirk is the doll-making one, right? DNA is a part of making one so that's why I asked. Midnight turned to Aizawa with a smirk. Maybe we can hand those annoying reporters a doll of All Might and they'll go. Aizawa, now downing Midnight's coffee, set the mug down and scoffed. You and Mike always have the worst ideas. Can Yagi-san not speak to them? Midoriya piped up. Midnight quickly turned to him in surprise. You know Yagi? Midoriya nodded. He actually helped me come up with my idea for the hairs, he replied, pointing to Aizawa's strand. Midnight opened her mouth to say more but was cut off by Aizawa. You got 2 minutes to make it to English Kid. Now noticing the clock, Midoriya grabbed his bag and ran out of the room. "Thank you, sensei," he called out. With the student gone, midnight whirled on Aizawa. Does he know Yagi or Yagi? He met Midoriya in his true form and started training him. Aizawa explained. I don't know how close they are, but it's coming up to almost a year of knowing each other, so this will end up going poorly. Midnight shrugged, reaching for her mug only to find it empty. So what was your genius husband's idea anyway? She asked, scowling at the thief. He said that if we beat up the reporters for trespassing, it's technically legal. Right as the bell for lunch rang, Midoriya quickly made his way into the support class, which was empty save for Power Loader sitting at his desk. Power Loader sensei, it's Midoriya. Yagi-san said you would know? Someone's eager. When Yagi told me your plan and to expect you to approach me, I didn't think it would be so soon. Power Loader said. Show me what you have. Midoriya laid 2 plastic bags on the desk. I put Aizawa-sensei's in a different bag because I wasn't sure if he wanted to be part of the class set or dash. Hold it right there, kid, the hero interrupted. I have a perfect plan. He held up the bag of class 1 as hair. This is easy, so come find me before lunch ends and it'll be done. As for Aizawa's, you didn't hear it from me, but your class will be using your hero costumes real soon, so you'll have his by then. Midoriya thanked Power Loader and headed into the cafeteria, where he found his friends plus the new additions of Azui and Siro sitting at the table. Well, hello Mr. Class Republic, Ashido teased, much to Midoriya's dismay. Don't remind me, he groaned. I don't really think I can live up to the expectation. Your quick-witted mind makes you a perfect candidate to lead us. Ida said. That's one of the reasons I voted for you. Me too. Uraraka piped up. Me 3. Azui unexpectedly added. After receiving some confused looks, she explained. As much as I'd like to have been class rep, I wouldn't have the time. Midoriya-chan made a big impression on me the last 2 days, so I voted for him. Midoriya was touched by what she had said. Thank you so much, Azui. Call me Tsuyu. While Uraraka turned to Ida and began bombarding him with questions, with the others watching, Midoriya leaned over to where Bakugo was beside him and whispered. I saw you had 0 votes. Who did you vote for? None of your FING business. Bakugo growled. Weird name. Is that my Netta's replacement? Midoriya ducked from Bakugo's swipe and continued to listen to Ida explain his family history. It was then when Midoriya noticed for the first time ever that he was sitting at a full table. The last time this happened when he was a child, and even then, it was assigned seating. Not even Bakugo would sit with him every day, as he had other friends. Being here, sitting with everyone, it was nice. That DMN alarm had to ruin the moment though. Lunch was ending in 10 minutes, and considering what had happened, Midoriya did not expect Power Loader to still be in his classroom, but he checked anyways. What he ended up finding was a small box on the desk, a note saying, for Midoriya, taped on top of it. Midoriya took the box and opened it, smiling at what he saw. 15 strands of hair are quite small when put together, but it was enough to make the braided bracelet that now sat on his wrist. Deciding to quickly test it out, Midoriya opened his notebook and focused on the first name he saw. He stared at the bracelet and focused on Tokoyami's height and weight. One strand of the bracelet began glowing, and soon enough, the familiar light showed itself and grew to its full size, taking the form of an empty-eyed Tokoyami. You are way creepier with blank eyes. Midoriya muttered before summoning the doll away. It felt weird making the doll without Tokoyami present, almost as if he was intruding on something. Midoriya told everyone that he only wanted the DNA and information in case of an emergency, and a small part of him hoped he would never have to make their dolls. He shook his head and exited the classroom, nearly running into Yaoyorozu in the process. Yaoyorozu. Just the person I was looking for. Oh, Midoriya. Do you want to decide who will be vice rep right now? She asked. Actually, I have something to tell you first. So that's why I think Ida should replace me. Midoriya finished. As much as he wanted to meet his friend's eye to see his reaction, he was pretty sure he would lose his composure over how much he'd blush. As Ida walked up to the front of the class, applause and cheers following him, Sata raised his hand. So who's the vice rep? Well, Yaoyorozu and I will have to discuss it and dash. I am. Yaoyorozu interrupted. Midoriya said it himself. Ida's actions today showed that he is perfect for the job. He reacted far better than I could have. With the decision made and everyone continuing to talk, Midoriya made his way back to his desk. Too focused reflecting on today's events, he missed the raised eyebrow on Bakuga's face as he looked at Yaoyorozu, who was too busy focusing on Ida's praises to notice. Almost everyone on the bus was practically buzzing with excitement as they began their journey. They only knew that they were doing rescue training, but other than that, the details were left unclear. Midoriya sat in his seat as he watched his classmates discuss what they would be doing once they arrived. Midoriya, Tsuyu suddenly said, "Did you end up finishing the bracelet?" "Yeah, I did," he said excitedly, showing off his wrist. "I went back to Power Loader and got a cover over it so the outer part of the bracelet is protected but the inner part is still touching my skin. If that has the rest of the class and you have your original 2 lockets, then what's that?" she asked, pointing to his coat. He looked down at his newest addition and smiled. Clasped onto his coat like a brooch was what Power Loader promised on delivering. Around the 17th or 18th century there were these things called hair ornaments. What's interesting about them is that you can have it made with someone's hair in the center of it. He pressed one finger over the middle of it and the reinforced plastic slid down to reveal one black hair. "I'm keeping Aizawa's here." "Your quirk is amazing, Midoriya." Kirishima gushed. "My quirk really pales in comparison. Every quirk is unique and useful," Midoriya said as he blushed. "Yours is incredible too. If we want to talk about real powerhouses though, Todoroki and Bakugo is where it's at." Sada said. "I can't really see Bakugo being popular with his attitude though." Tsuyu added. "Want to say that to my effing face?" Bakugo exploded, causing the bus to burst out laughing. The incoming argument was cut short as Aizawa announced that they were here. Getting off the bus, they were greeted with the sight of a huge building, but the outside was nothing compared to the inside. There seemed to be a place for everyone kind of disaster, from wildfires to blizzards to collapsed buildings. Standing in front of it all at the entrance was Pro Hero 13, and Midoriya was 80% Uraraka cut off the circulation in his arm by how hard she was squeezing. "Where's All Might?" 13 asked. Aizawa just lifted up 3 fingers in response. "Was he coming in 3 minutes then?" "Well then," 13 said, turning to the class. "Welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ, for short." They continued their speech, and just as instructions were about to be given out, Aizawa tenses, staring at the fountain at the central plaza. Is this part of the exercise?" Zero asks, watching the black swirl grow bigger and bigger. It reached a point before stopping, and out of it came dozens of people. At the forefront of the group was a figure made of mist, a person covered with hands, and a hulking beast. "Everyone huddle up and don't move," Aizawa shouted, and the class nearly reeled back as they realized they've never seen their teacher like this. "Those are villains." A chill ran down Midoriya's spine as the last of the villains spread out. Aizawa stood at the front of entrance, goggles on and one hand on his weapon. "Only 13 and Eraserhead?" The schedule said All Might would be here too. The person covered in hands said. "So that's what the gate was about." Midoriya heard Aizawa whisper. The villain scratched his neck and looked at the class. "I wonder if some dead students might bring him here." 13, start evacuating the students. Kaminari, try using your quirk to get help. Aizawa instructed, moving to head down and fight. "Sensei, you can't possibly fight them all alone," Midoriya said, panicked. "A head-on battle like this. No hero is a one-trick pony," Aizawa told him. If it weren't for the situation they were in, Midoriya would have been calmed by his teacher's tone. 13, get them out of here." He leaped down and entered the fray. The rest of the class turned around and followed 13 towards the entrance, but were stopped by the black mist from earlier. "I'm afraid I cannot let you leave." The mist shrank until it took on a vaguely humanoid shape. "We are the League of Villains, and we have come here to kill the symbol of peace himself, All Might." A collective gasp came from the class. "We were under the impression that he was supposed to be here, But that changes nothing for me. The mist grew until it encircled the group, trapping them all with him. Not if we end you first. Bursting from the group was Bakugo and Kirishima, charging right at the villain. It appeared like they managed to hit him, but when the dust settled, the villain was unscathed. That was close, he commented. You students truly are the best of the best. With those final words, darkness surrounded the students as they tried to get away, and soon, Midoriya was blinded. His vision came back just in time to go through about 5 different things all at once. He hit the water hard, and just as he regained his senses, he was face to face with a shark-headed villain. Just as the villain was about to attack, his savior in the form of a frog girl landed a kick on the villain and knocked him out. Just as quickly, he was wrapped up in Ajui's tongue and landing on the deck of a ship. Thank you, Ajui. Midoriya panted as he tried to catch his breath. Call me Tsu, but we seem to be in a lot of trouble here, she said as she climbed over the railing. This is far too planned out. Midoriya said. The media rush was probably a distraction to get the schedule. If they thought everything through, that means they must have figured out a way to kill All Might. Ajui added. They both didn't like the sound of it, but it was the truth. It would be pointless to do this ambush unless they had a plan. A splash interrupted their conversation as they peered over the edge of the boat. Ripples of water turned into heads as villains kept popping out of the water, quickly surrounding the two. The two backed away from the edge. There must be a reason to go after All Might. Midoriya muttered. But if there's even a chance that they have a way to beat All Might, his voice raising, then we have a fight to win. They looked back over the side of the ship, now getting a good view of what they were up against currently. They all have water-type quirks. Midoriya commented. Their ringleader must have known about this zone then. Ajui added. Yeah. But there's one odd point in all this. He turned to the girl. They put you here, which means they don't know about our quirks. You're right. If they knew my quirk, they would have put me in the conflagration zone. They're waiting for us to get in the water. Midoriya said, watching the villains. Tsu, what can your quirk do specifically? The most useful stuff I can do right now is jump really high, stick to walls, and stretch my tongue out, she explained. Do you think you can take us both to land with a jump? Ajui examined the distance and nodded. It would be pointless though since the villains will follow us. That's where I will come in, Midoriya said. He looked at his bracelet and began muttering to himself. Ashido's acid will just mix with the water, Kaken's explosions won't be effective, can't really use Urarikas on everyone. Got it. He shut his eyes and recalled the notes he made himself memorize for the past 3 days. One hair on his bracelet glowed and the green light flew out of it and grew, and soon enough, a blanked-eyed Kaminari was standing in front of him. Midoriya, we can't kill them. Ajui deadpanned, realizing where this was going. No death. Midoriya quickly said. The doll's quirks are weaker, remember? So doll Kaminari will probably just knock them out. They can breathe underwater too. Well, in that case, she wrapped him up with her tongue. Whenever you're ready, she muffled out. Doll Kaminari, use your quirk on the water. Midoriya commanded. Yes, Izuku. The doll made its way over to the edge and pointed towards the villains, releasing a bolt of electricity towards them. The electricity hit the water and spread out, hitting the villains and causing them to seize up and float in the water completely still. Midoriya didn't have time to admire his plan before being pulled away from the boat as Ajui leaped across the majority of the water, landing them closer to the central plaza. He turned around to see doll Kaminari still standing there on the deck of the slowly sinking ship, unmoving. That's pretty depressing. Ajui said. No kidding. Midoriya said, dismissing the doll and watching it disappear. He and Ajui hid behind a rock as they watched their teacher continue to fend off the horde of villains. There was a lull in the fight as the man covered in hands lowered his hand from his neck and started sprinting towards Aizawa. The hero turned around and dodged his attack before launching his own counterattack. He drove his elbow into the villain's stomach and stilled, feeling the villain grabbing his elbow. Your duration is getting slower and slower, the villain said, placing his last finger on Aizawa's elbow. You shouldn't overdo it. Aizawa pulled away and punched the villain in the face, moving backwards as he avoided more villains. Now that his elbow wasn't blocked, AU and Midoriya could clearly see the cracked skin and exposed muscle. "You should know something, hero," the villain taunted, stepping aside and letting the beast move forward. "I'm not the boss here." If Midoriya didn't see it with his own eyes, he would have a hard time believing something that large managed to move so fast, but he and AU watched as the creature moved to Aizawa's side in the blink of an eye, grab the back of his head, and smash his face into the ground. Meet the anti-symbol of peace, 3 feet taller, 90 kilograms heavier, and twice as strong as your precious hero, the bioengineered Nomu, the villain said smugly. It was like watching a wreck that you can't look away from. Aizawa's head hit the ground before the Nomu grabbed his injured arm and snapped it like a twig. The two students were almost relieved to see the mist villain appear, as it caused the Nomu to stop wailing on their teacher. Tamura Shigaraki, the mist villain, greeted. "Kurogyri, is 13 dead?" The villain, now known as Shigaraki, asked. "They've been incapacitated, but a student managed to escape," Kurogyri replied. Shigaraki growled in frustration. "It's game over if the pros arrive, we're leaving." He paused as he looked at Aizawa. "But not before we leave them a present to wound the symbol of peace." Shigaraki whipped his head around and sprinted towards where Midoriya and AU were hiding, one arm stretched out towards AU's face. In a panic, he moved and pushed her out of the way and at the same time, summoned a doll right in front of them, intercepting Shigaraki's attack. Doll 2 stood still as it accepted the hand on the face with no other reaction, and Midoriya held AU's shoulders tightly as he watched his doll disintegrate, the leftover dust disappearing as the doll was now dead, by his quirk's definition. He hoped he wouldn't need to use Doll 2 for the next 10 minutes as the doll's cooldown started. "What's this I see, a cloning quirk?" Shigaraki asked, genuinely curious. "Get away from her. Attack him." Midoriya shouted, summoning another doll. Doll Kirishima hardened its skin as it aimed a punch at Shigaraki, but in the blink of an eye, the Nomu stood in his place, picking up the doll and throwing it aside, destroying it instantly. "Those copies, they follow your commands?" Shigaraki mused. "Shame I won't see your quirk in action anymore." Shigaraki opened his mouth to give another command to the Nomu, but was cut off by a boom from the entrance of the UFE. "Fear not." Midoriya could feel the relief hit AU as the two clung onto each other and at the same time, see the villains tense up as everyone in the building recognized the voice. "For I am here." In a flash, All Might leaped down from the entrance and made his way over, managing to clear out the remaining small fry and collect Aizawa, Midoriya, and AU to take them away from the fight. "Take Aizawa to the entrance but be gentle, he's unconscious right now," All Might instructed. All Might, that villain with the brain, is crazy fast and strong. Midoriya told the hero. "Will you be able to dash?" "Worry not, Midoriya." All Might told him, his normal smile softening as he looked at him. With that, All Might charged into battle. Midoriya watched him hit the Nomu and panicked, realizing that not even All Might could fight against it properly, Shigaraki taunting as he talked about the creature's shock absorption. "Midoriya, how are we going to take Aizawa safely?" AU asked, snapping him out of his daze. "Oh, he went through the class list in his head once more, picking the perfect candidate." Doll Uraraka stood idly, waiting for its instructions. "Use your quirk on Aizawa and come with us to the entrance." The doll gently tapped Aizawa's leg, causing their teacher to float upwards. AU grabbed his uninjured wrist with her tongue and started headed towards the entrance, making the pro look like the world's worst balloon. They were halfway there when Midoriya stopped to turn and look back, only to see the Nomu coming out of 2 portals, trying to drag All Might down with him. The worst part was, All Might seemed to be struggling. "Doll Uraraka, you are to obey Tsuyu's instructions until she dismisses you," Midoriya commanded. He turned around to face AU. "Go on ahead, All Might's in trouble." "Midori dash. Trust me," he called back to her as he began sprinting back towards the fight. He was nearly there when he saw the swirling portal of Kurogyri's quirk open up, but he was moving forward far too quickly to avoid it. Just as he was about to end up who knows where, 3 things happened at once. An explosion knocked Kurogiri over as Bakugo pinned him down. Ice began crawling up the Nomu as Todoroki arrived, and just as Shigaraki was about to free Kurogiri, Kirishima arrived, causing him to move back to avoid the attack. Thanks to Todoroki, All Might freed himself from the Nomu and he stood by the 4 students, ready for another attack as Bakugo kept Kurogiri held down. Nomu, kill the explosive brat. Shigaraki demanded. The Nomu shuddered before standing back up on its own 2 feet, one arm shattering from being trapped in ice. How is it still moving? Midoriya gasped. I thought his quirk was shock absorption. All Might said in shock. The Nomu's muscles pulsated and grew as the previously gone arm was quickly replaced, blood splattering on the ground in front of the heroes. I didn't say it was its only quirk. Nomu was created to counter your every move. Just as the Nomu was about to hit Bakugo, All Might jumped forward, taking the hit for himself. All of you, stay back. All Might shouted. Things would have gone differently if we didn't appear. Todoroki said, shifting his stance. You're correct, Todoroki, and thank you for that, but now, All Might stepped forward, taking in a deep breath. Sit back and watch a pro get serious. Midoriya, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Todoroki watched as the Nomu and All Might collided, matching punches at an alarming speed until finally, All Might wound up and hit the Nomu with one final blow. As the dust began to settle, the 4 boys watched the Nomu fly up and out of the building in awe, the realization of what their future will be dawning on them. Ooh, you cheat! Shigaraki screeched, scratching furiously at his neck. Let's end this now, villain. All Might declared, yet he made no move. Kaken, Midoriya whispered, his eyes not leaving All Might. I think All Might's hurt. No shit he is. Bakugo whispered back. No, I mean All Might isn't moving at all. Bakugo looked back at All Might and shook his head. You're freaking out too much, he'll win this too. Bakugo's words did not dissuade his worries as he saw the blood from the corner of All Might's mouth and his shaking hand through the cloud of what he thinks is smoke surrounding the pro. Shigaraki, we still have time before the pros arrive. We can finish him off. Kurogiri said. Right, we can still do this. Shigaraki muttered, taking a slow step towards All Might. Midoriya's eyes widened as All Might continued to make no move to stop him. I need to distract the villain. Midoriya thought, looking around for something to use before his eyes landed on the blood stain in front of him. Meet the anti-symbol of peace, 3 feet taller, 90 kilograms heavier, and twice as strong as your precious hero, the bioengineered Nomu. Midoriya has never been so thankful for knowing useless All Might trivia as he slammed his hand down on the ground. The ball of green light appeared immediately, growing much larger than any of his previous ones had ever grown until a doll of the Nomu stood still, awaiting orders. Midoriya, Kirishima whispered. Roar at them. Midoriya commanded. The doll let out a screech that made Midoriya happy that it didn't have present mix quirk in its arsenal. Shigaraki and Kurogiri paused, looking at the doll in disbelief. And Nomu? Finish of All Might. Shigaraki hurriedly said, but the doll remained still. Think again. Midoriya shouted. Doll Nomu, stop Shigaraki and Kurogiri. The doll sprinted forward, arm pulled back as it landed a punch on Shigaraki, causing him to fly backwards. Just before he hit the ground, he disappeared through a portal. Midoriya looked back at Kurogiri only to see that he was gone too. As for the doll, it was looking around with its fists up, wondering where its opponent disappeared to. Midoriya took a step forward towards it, but stopped as the doors of the USJ were blasted open by the rest of the pro heroes. Sorry we're a bit late. Nedza said. The pros got to work handling the rest of the villains. With everyone preoccupied the heroes, Midoriya ran up towards Doll Nomu. Hopefully I never have to see you again, he panted, the adrenaline finally wearing off as he tried to stay upright. Thanks for the help. He dismissed the doll. He then turned to where All Might was standing, the smoke encompassing him now growing larger and larger. And to think I was going to tell you on my own terms tomorrow. All Might mused. Tell me what? Midoriya asked, stumbling forward. The smoke blocked Midoriya's view of All Might, so he moved forward to get a better look. Emerging from the smoke, he paused, feeling the last of his energy drain and his vision go dark as he looked up at a familiar face. Yagi-san. The first thing Midoriya saw when he woke up was an endless landscape of white. It took him a moment to realize that he was simply staring at the ceiling of the infirmary and trying to get his bearings instead of somehow landing himself in some heavenly world. The second thing he saw once he got his bearings was the body of a lanky, blond man in the bed next to him, bandages scattered along his body and his feet hanging off the edge of the too-short bed. The man made eye contact with Midoriya and suddenly, memories of the day's events came back to him in a wave. Arriving at the USJ, getting ambushed, escaping with Tsu, Aizawa getting hurt, the Nomu, All Might arriving, Doll Nomu, and Yagi-san. The man smiled at Midoriya and nodded his head. I'm glad to see that you're awake now, you gave me quite the scare. You're here and you're injured. What I saw at you, you're really dash. Yes, I am All Might, Yagi said. You better not power up and tear that hospital gown apart, a voice said. Midoriya and Yagi turned to see a man with a hat and tan coat making his way closer to them. From behind him, Recovery Girl moved towards Midoriya to check on him. The man turned to Midoriya and smiled. Hello Midoriya, I'm Detective Tsukachi Naomasa from the police force. If it's alright with you, I want to ask you what happened during the attack from your perspective. Midoriya sat up and nodded as he began explaining what happened from when they entered the USJ to him passing out. And after I dismissed the Nomu, I passed out. Midoriya finished. Actually, he saw me power down, and then he passed out, Yagi but in, causing Midoriya to look at all the adults in a panic. We know about All Might and Yagi Tashinori, dearie, Recovery Girl said as she took his blood pressure. We also know about 1FO-. Wow, Naomasa, got any more questions? Yagi blurted out, not so subtly shaking his head at Recovery Girl with wide eyes. The hero scoffed at Yagi and threw her arms up as she walked towards her office. Midoriya could barely make out her muttering about how Yagi should have told him at the beginning of the year. Anyways, Naomasa pulled up a chair and sat down between the two patients. Yagi was telling me about your quirk while you were asleep. You can make these dolls of people, yes? That's correct, Midoriya responded. Yet you made a doll of the Nomu, Naomasa continued, which begs the question of what exactly the Nomu is. We were under the assumption that it was an animal experimented on, but we wanted to ask about your quirk's limitations, Yagi continued. Midoriya's blood ran cold when the dots started connecting for him. My quirk doesn't work on animals, he whispered. Kaken and I tried once when we were little and petting a dog, but it didn't work. My quirk only works on humans. Which means, the Nomu is human, Tsukachi concluded, writing on his notepad. Thank you for your help Midoriya, I'll leave you two to talk now. Tsukachi sent a knowing look at Yagi before getting up and walking away, leaving the two alone. I'm sorry for not telling you so soon, Yagi said. No, don't apologize, Midoriya immediately replied. It's such a major secret and I just found out by accident. I understand why it was a secret. You were going to find out, Yagi admitted, sitting up as well. I was planning on telling you everything tomorrow. Is it because I was close with you as Yagi? I will admit, getting to know you this past year has been a wonderful blessing, and helped make my next decision much easier. Yagi moved from his bed to sit on Midoriya's, a serious look on his face. I guess I should start with my appearance. You want me to what? Midoriya managed to choke out. He was rendered speechless throughout Yagi's entire story, from his injury 5 years ago to the truth behind his quirk. From the moment I met you, I knew you held a certain spark, but it wasn't until when I saw you rescue Uraraka during the entrance exam that I was sure of my decision, and your actions in saving me only reassured it. I want you, Midoriya Izuku, to be my successor and inherent one for all. I'll do it. Midoriya blurted out, not knowing where his impulse control went. I'll be your successor. Yagi chuckled at the boy. You've always been one to dive in head first. I'm sure you need your rest, so we'll continue our talk tomorrow since there's no school. I'm sure you understand that everything said remains a secret. But, Midoriya trailed off as he looked at Recovery Girl's office, the door wide open. There are some people who know, Yagi explained. Recovery girl, Principal Nedzu, Naomesa, my old teacher, and Dash. Yagi cut himself off before continuing. The friend I would mention to you sometimes. Midoriya nodded along but suddenly froze, the bliss of the idea of his future quirk being replaced by a sticky situation. Everyone knows my quirk, he began. How will I explain that? There are cases of people developing more of their quirk as time goes on. It's rare, but it happens, Yagi explains. The stress of USJ took a toll on your body and unlocked a new part to Dollmaker. I guess that can work, Midoriya mused. My mom doesn't know much about quirk science, and no one in the class has known me long enough to question it except for Dash. Kaken won't buy it. Midoriya began to wring his hands together. He'll either think I was hiding it or was experimented on like that Nomu or Dash. Izuku, Yagi interrupted, taking the boy's wrist to stop his fidgeting. The sound of his first name threw him off as he looked up. Are you sure Bakugo will react like that? We know everything about each other, whether we like it or not. Yagi looked down towards the bed, lost in thought. This is not my decision to make, but I must ask if he can keep a secret. He can, Midoriya reassured him. If that's the case, then you can explain the situation to him if you choose to, Yagi decided. Midoriya let out a breath he didn't know he was holding in. Thank you. All Might. That just sounds weird to me, Yagi laughed. Please don't ever call me that while I'm like this, and drop the sen, too while you're at it. Midoriya smiled up at his mentor. Sure thing, Yagi. Midoriya sat outside the steps of the Bakugo household later that evening, waiting for his friend to come outside. He turned around when he heard the door opened, standing up to greet his friend. You better not be here to check on me, Bakugo said. No, it's not that, Midoriya began, walking down the steps and beckoning Bakugo to follow him. I need to talk to you. Bakugo raised an eyebrow at his oddly serious friend, but caught and walked next to him. The two eventually made their way to the park they always walked by on their way home in junior high. Midoriya sat on one of the swings and waiting for Bakugo to sit on the other one. Once he did, he pointed to the sidewalk by the park. Do you remember when we were 12, and you told me to make my quirk stronger right over there? Midoriya asked, swaying slightly on the swing. Yeah, what about it? Bakugo looked slightly put off by Midoriya's serious tone. Do you think I did it? Well, you're certainly not some dead FNG weight, Bakugo replied. But you're also never done training. You're right about that, but what if I told you I found a way to get stronger? Can you get to the FING point and stop being so cryptic? Bakugo snapped. Why are you acting so ominous about getting stronger with me of all people? Because All Might is going to give me his quirk, Midoriya blurted out, effectively stunning Bakugo. Are you sure your doll Nomu didn't hit you too? I'm serious, Kaken. I talked with All Might when I woke up. Midoriya began giving Bakugo the same explanation Yagi gave him in the infirmary. So let me get this straight, Bakugo began. You were trained by All Might without knowing it was him, you impressed him with your recklessness, and now he wants to give you his quirk and make you his successor? Basically, Midoriya said sheepishly. I knew if anyone would figure out that something weird was up, it would be you, so I'm telling you first. Well, you're right about that. All the other dumbasses in the class would just gush about it or something, Bakugo scoffed, and Midoriya noticed how his hands were clenched around the chain keeping the swing up. When are you going to start training with it? Wait, that's it? Midoriya paused. No other reaction? Bakugo crossed his arms and looked off to the side. It's FNG weird but straightforward, now answer my question. Well, I'm meeting up with him tomorrow, so probably then, Midoriya answered. Let's go home now, Bakugo suddenly said, getting up from the swing and stalking off. Gotta sleep early and be ready for the great All Might, right? Midoriya trailed behind Bakugo's hunched figure, wanting to call out to him and ask him what was wrong, but ultimately deciding not to. Bakugo worked through things alone, and the last thing he needed was the focus of his problem pestering him so soon. As for Bakugo, he refused to look behind him as he headed home, keeping his fist clenched in his pocket. He knew he didn't need a second quirk, he wasn't jealous about that at all. If he just kept working and making sure he didn't F up any more than he has, then he'd be fine. He felt his phone vibrate in his pocket and pulled it out to check his notifications, seeing a few text messages from the person who basically demanded his phone number that day. Kirishima, dude. Kirishima, you live near Midoriya, right? Kirishima, do you know if he's okay? Bakugu scowled as he typed back. Bakugu, never better chapter text. Eat this. I'm sorry, what? Midoriya stood with Yagi as the sunrise stretched over Dagoba Beach, the sunlight washing over them creating a dramatic scene for anyone who could be watching. If only Yagi wasn't holding out a strand of his own hair out towards Midoriya, effectively ruining the mood. In order to obtain one for all, you must absorb the DNA of the user, so here, All Might explained, gesturing to the strand of hair. Midoriya hesitantly took the strand of hair out of his hands. This won't break Dollmaker, right? Since it uses DNA as well. Yagi's smile remained on his face, but Midoriya could see his eyes widen at the question. Well, you won't be hurt. That doesn't answer my question. What's the worst that could happen? You make a doll of me using one for all. Yagi scrunched his eyebrows. What even will happen if you make a doll of me? Which version will appear? Midoriya closed his eyes and concentrated on his All Might trivia. Soon enough, the strand of hair released a green light. Wait, how do you already know my weight and height? Don't worry about it. The green light swirled around Midoriya before stopping in the space between the two people. The light grew taller and taller until finally forming into a very thin and gaunt doll. Has my hair always looked like that? Yagi asked, circling the doll. Sorry you have to find out this way? Midoriya said, not knowing how to answer. At least we have our answer. I refer to this body as my true form, so I guess it makes sense. Can it use my quirk? Midoriya hesitated. All Might? Use one for all. It was a blink and you miss it kind of moment. All Might transformed into All Might's powered-up form and almost immediately transformed back into the smaller form. Well, that answers that. As Yagi continued to examine the doll, Midoriya quickly shoved the hair into his mouth. If he was going to do this weird thing, he was going to do it while his hero wasn't making eye contact with him. So when's the part where I start parting the ocean with a single punch? Midoriya asked excitedly, bouncing from one foot to the other and throwing punches. In roughly 3 hours. Midoriya stopped his bouncing and looked to Yagi for an explanation. It takes some time to settle in. I asked you to come here early so we can get food and go warm up. Yagi said with a bright smile. Now come on, I feel like pancakes. Midoriya picked up his bag, dismissed the doll, and followed Yagi to a nearby restaurant. Once they were seated and ordered, Yagi gave Midoriya a serious look. So how did Bakugu take the news? He asked. Midoriya fiddled with the placemat as he explained. Way better than I thought, actually. He was on edge, but who wouldn't be when getting that news? Is he perhaps on edge due to some jealousy? Yagi asked. Oh God, no, Midoriya laughed. I think if you asked him, he would turn it down and say he'll become #1 with his own power. Midoriya thought back to Bakugu's clenched fists and dismissive attitude. He wouldn't want one for all, that much he was certain of, but something was telling him that Bakugu wasn't just acting off because of all the information. Does anyone else know about your, Midoriya makes a gesture at Yagi's frail body. The UA staff knows about it. They were quite surprised to see you talk to me so casually while I was in this form. The confused expressions all make sense now, Midoriya giggled. As the two continued to talk and eat, the tension that Midoriya wasn't even aware he felt disappeared. He felt himself shift from talking to his idol to talking with his trainer that he has gotten to know for almost a year now. I also must ask how you're feeling, Yagi says now more solemnly. I'm fine? Is one for all supposed to be doing something right now? I mean about USJ. I'm alright, Yagi. I'm just glad I managed to make that no doll in time, Midoriya says. Everyone in the class is grateful to you, 13, and Aizawa-sensei. Well, I should say that I am quite grateful to you, Midoriya, Yagi says, ignoring Midoriya's protest. I don't want to hear any protest. You saved me, it's as simple as that. Midoriya ducked his head in embarrassment. He took another bite of his food and hoped that Yagi didn't notice his red face. Their conversation was interrupted by a phone buzzing. Yagi pulled out his phone, chuckled a bit, and began typing out something before turning the phone to show a confused Midoriya. I had to lie sadly, but the staff are a curious bunch. Welcome Itoa, welco. Hey All Might. Did Midoriya pass out before or after you transformed? Sniped ya. Please say after so we can test the doll theory. Twig Might. He passed out before I transformed back. Twig Might. And are you still wondering about me as a doll? Sniped ya. You can't tell me you're not the tiniest bit curious. My money's on the doll being the buff form. Go gadget melatonin, bet. Wear your new F glasses when you're on your phone before I get recovery girl. And stay in your hospital bed your healing beach. Wait, no, you're not supposed to see that part, Yagi said, quickly pulling the phone back. Pretty sure I wasn't supposed to see the chat name either, Midoriya teased, watching his hero's face pale. Let's just start training now. It was another hour of warming up and running drills on the beach before Yagi finally began instructing him on One for All. With you being the 9th user, this quirk is now more powerful than my own surplus. Normally there is some rigorous training before the quirk is handed over to prep the body, but you handled that yourself by cleaning up the beach. What would happen if I got the quirk before I was ready? Midoriya asked. Your limbs would pop off your body, he responded bluntly. He didn't waver at Midoriya's horrified expression as he gave him a thumbs up. Good thing that won't happen. Okay, possible dilemma aside, what should I do now? Yagi moved into a familiar fighting stance as he faced the ocean. You must feel the power of One for All coursing through your veins, giving you the power you need to be the symbol of peace. Now then, Yagi turned to face Midoriya. We'll do a little trial run. Try throwing a punch at the water. Midoriya moved to face the ocean, shifting his feet and taking a deep breath. Deep within him, he felt something familiar, but also different. It was like waking up after a well-deserved rest. Midoriya felt on top of the world as he felt his right arm crackle and the green lightning coating his right arm. He took a deep breath and threw a punch forward. Smash! Wait, holdo dash. The ocean split apart for a moment as the air from his punch flew forward, throwing water up into the air and letting it fall down as mist. Overall, it was a beautiful sight. And then the pain hit. His arm felt like it was on fire. He could barely move it without wanting to cry out in pain. He barely registered Yagi running up to him before his vision disappeared. When he woke up from passing out for the second time in 2 days, it was to the sound of yelling. I tried to stop him. Why would you test this out at the beach anyways? It's a secluded spot. You are teaching this boy nothing but careless and, oh look, you're awake. Recovery girl made her way over to Midoriya's bedside, but not before whacking Yagi's leg with her cane. How are you feeling? A bit tired, Midoriya replies. Why am I at UA? You're here because someone, she turns to glare at Yagi, didn't think to tell you what the repercussions of using One for All for the first time is. Midoriya looked down at his arm, now wrapped up and bandaged from shoulder to fingertips. You're saying this is normal? Well, when I first used it, I didn't obliterate my arm to that extent, Yagi says sheepishly. But it was still obliterated. You act as if I'm not the one who patched you up afterwards, Recovery girl scolded. You two are lucky school is cancelled until Monday and that I was here doing work anyways. You already get enough questions about Midoriya knowing Yagi. You don't need any more. What now? Midoriya asks. You're going to have to keep training to get it under control, but not until school is back up and running. I'd prefer to have you here when you're not being snuck in on campus. It wasn't really sneaking, Yagi muttered under his breath. He cleared his throat and smiled at Recovery girl. I'll be seeing you tomorrow for the staff meeting? Of course, one more thing however. Surprisingly, she began looking a bit more embarrassed. It's been bugging me since Mike and Snipe brought it up, but how does Yagi's doll look? Yagi let out a chuckle before stretching his arm out towards Midoriya. Midoriya placed his uninjured hand on Yagi's wrist, watching the hero's hand glow green before the familiar ball of light flew out and landed in the middle of the infirmary, creating Yagi's doll suspiciously faster than normal. While Recovery Girl looked surprised at the discovery and Yagi explained the doll's quirk limits, Midoriya began to feel something strange, which is that he didn't feel anything at all. The usual strain he felt that connect him to his doll's existence wasn't there anymore, and it felt weirdly okay. Midoriya, are you still in pain? Recovery Girl asks, now noticing Midoriya's thoughtful expression. No, I'm not, I just, He didn't know how to explain this weird feeling to the adults, but he did have another idea. Looking down at his bracelet, he concentrated on one particular student, and in no time, he opened his eyes to find Kirishima's doll standing beside Dollmite. Only then was when he noticed the tug becoming more obvious. Is something wrong with your quirk? Yagi asked. You know how I told you about the string I feel that gets more and more strained with every doll I make? Feels stronger now. The dolls are being made faster too. Strong enough to make a third doll? His question was answered when a doll Kaminari was quickly made, making Midoriya's gut feel tighter. There we go. That's the limit, Midoriya finally said. And it doesn't hurt? Recovery Girl asked worryingly, inching closer to his bedside. It feels the same as when I made 2 dolls. He turned to Yagi and raised one eyebrow at him. Looks like One for All did do something. It's only an extra doll now, nothing too major I see, Yagi says. You can deal with this doll nonsense when you're back at school. Recovery Girl nearly shouted, throwing her hands up. All of you, dolls included, come by before class on Monday so I can check up on you. Midoriya dismissed his dolls and collected his things, leaving the infirmary and UA with Yagi. Do you need a ride home? Yagi asks as he turned towards the parking lot. No, don't worry about it, Midoriya tells him. The station isn't even far at all. In that case, I'll see you on Monday. See you soon, Yagi. Once on the train, Midoriya took a seat, pulled out his phone, and sent a message to one person in particular. Midoriya, good news is that One for All gave me a weird boost and I can make 3 dolls way faster now. Kaken, Sundesu. And what could possibly be the bad news? Midoriya, I completely shattered my arm and had to go to UA4. Recovery Girl to fix it. Kaken, Sundesu. Kaken, Sundesu. What the is wrong with you? Midoriya, you're coming with me to school early on Monday so I can get these bandages off. Kaken, Sundesu. You got bandages? Kaken, Sundesu. Good luck. Midoriya, what do you mean? Read 1:38 p.m. A-hole, Midoriya muttered to himself as he got off the train and headed home. He breathed in a sigh of relief as he entered his house. Finally, he had nothing to worry about. Izuku? What happened to your arm? So that's what Bakuga meant. Midoriya watched the gears in his mom's head turn as she tried to process what he had just told her. So let me get this straight. The stress of the USJ attack caused a new part of your quirk to appear, so you went out this morning to test it out and hurt your arm. That's exactly it, Midoriya lies. But what does super strength have to do with making dolls? Midoriya was far more prepared for this reaction. He looked his mom in the eyes and shrugs. I don't know. Dollmaker doesn't relate to yours or Dad's quirk. Science is weird. It took a moment, but eventually Inko nodded after hearing what her son said, agreeing that yes, science is weird. Is your arm okay though? She asks, gently taking his hand to examine the injury. Just a bit sore. I'm going to go visit Recovery Girl when I go back to school. Inko puts his hand down to pull her son into a hug, running her fingers through his hair. Just don't do anything as crazy as USJ while practicing. I don't want to go to UA again only to find you as the only missing student in the crowd again. I'll do my best, Midoriya says. I've got you to protect me, sort of. He opens the locket and summons doll Inko in the middle of the living room, untouched from the toil of the attack. The doll takes a step forward towards Midoriya, now confused as he didn't tell it to move at all. It places a hand on Midoriya's head and ruffles his hair a bit, giving him a smile that would be reassuring if it weren't for the blank eyes. Did you tell it to do that telepathically? Inko asks, staring up at her copy. I didn't tell it to do anything, Midoriya whispers. Then why did it? Let me try something else. If this was related to One for All, then maybe the third doll and speedy summonings weren't the only upgrades Midoriya got. He opens the second locket and summons Dollmaker. As soon as the doll appears, it waits for a moment, but Midoriya remained silent, not giving it any instruction. Eventually, Dollmaker moves and sits in one of the recliners. More specifically, Bakugo's favorite chair in the house. Tell it to do something, Inko whispers. Midoriya looks to the doll. Doll Kaken, can you get me a glass of water? The doll stands and rolls its eyes before heading over to the kitchen. As soon as it was out of sight, Inko turned to Midoriya. It rolled its eyes and didn't say, "Hisuzuku." That's never happened before. I thought I finally got a nice Kaken, Midoriya said in disbelief. The doll eventually came back from the kitchen with a glass full of ice. It slammed the cup down in front of Midoriya and looked at him with empty eyes. Wait. They have little personality traits, Inko whispered, looking back at the loving smile doll Inko has on its face. I don't think USJ just unlocked a new part of Dollmaker to appear. I think Dollmaker got an upgrade. I think you're right, Midoriya said. I'll mess around with these new traits when I'm at school though. Better safe than sorry. Inko reached out and pinched Midoriya's cheek. You say that after you hurt yourself. Midoriya winced but laughed nonetheless, dismissing the dolls. Fine. No more broken arms. He had a feeling the promise wouldn't last long. Now back at school early in the morning, Midoriya and Bakugo began making their way to Recovery Girl's office in order to heal Midoriya one last time. What did your mom end up saying? Bakugo asked as they walked. Or did you spill your guts to her the moment you saw her? I told her the lie I'm going to tell everyone else. She looked confused, but we agreed that science is weird. Not this weird though. Who the F eats someone's hair to get a quirk? It worked, didn't it? Midoriya said. Just quit breaking your arm and do something useful with that quirk, Bakugo huffed, entering Recovery Girl's office. It was a quick lecture and kiss before Midoriya removed the bandages on his arm, which looked as perfect as it was before the incident. I better not see you here anytime soon, Recovery Girl teased as they left. Midoriya jogged ahead of Bakugo, turning right instead of left and heading off in the opposite direction of their classroom. Come with me to the teacher's lounge. I have to show you and Yagi something, he explained. What? Why? It has to do with you being a grump, Midoriya said. Before Bakugo could retaliate, Midoriya knocked on the door and waiting. Come in. There were only a few people in the staff room when they arrived. Yagi, Aizawa, Mike, and Midnight were all sitting at their desks, staring at the two boys who had arrived. The two students' eyes widened when they saw Aizawa, who was wrapped up like a mummy and acting as if nothing had happened. What was interesting too was that he had a pair of glasses on over all the bandages on his face. Are you sure you should be here? Bakugo immediately asked him. I'm perfectly fine and these bandages will come off soon enough, but unfortunately I have to wear glasses when I'm not doing any hero work from now on, Aizawa explained. As long as you're okay, Midoriya says, now walking over to Yagi. Yagi, I need to tell you about something with my quirk. Yagi raised an eyebrow and began to stand. Well, I'm sure the others don't want to be bored. Let's go talk in the hall. It wouldn't bore me at all, Aizawa interjected. We're both his trainers now in a sense. Yagi shot Midoriya a panicked look, but was surprised to see how calm the boy was about his reaction. Something weird happened with Dollmaker, and it's better if I just show you. As Midoriya opened his locket, he turned around and beckoned Bakugo to stand next to him. This is what I meant when it said it had to do with you. In an instant, Doll Bakugo appeared in the room. Just wait a moment, Midoriya whispered. Noticing that Midoriya was giving it no instruction, it scoffed. Am I doing anything or am I just going to be standing here like a jackass with you all staring at me? While Aizawa, Mike, and Midnight looked unfazed by the display, Yagi and Bakugo were both gaping at the doll. It's acting like me? Bakugo asked. Does it usually not? Mike asked. The dolls usually stand around and don't speak unless spoken to, Yagi explained. To see such a big behavioral shift is very strange. Midoriya nodded. The doll of my mom comforted me when I didn't ask, and when I was testing this theory, I asked Doll Kaken for a glass of water only for it to give me a cup of ice. It told me wait. Nice. Bakugo lifted a hand for the doll to high-five him, but the doll remained still. Feeling bad for him, Mike quickly got up from his desk, high-fived Bakugo, and sat back down. "So they're still obedient to you," Aizawa said. "But they act a bit more like their original at times. You said it was this doll and your mom's. Are they acting different because you've had them the longest, or is it any doll now?" Midnight asked. Try me. Try me." Mike pulled a strand of hair from his head and handed it to Midoriya. Almost instantly, a doll of his English teacher stood before him. "So if you don't tell the dolls anything after a while, it does whatever?" Midnight asks. "That should be it," Midoriya replies. Eventually, Doll Mike moves from its spot. It grabs a chair, takes a seat next to Aizawa, and begins checking the man for injuries. "Get rid of it, Midoriya," Aizawa says as he tries and fails to dodge out of the way of the doll. "Sorry, sensei," Midoriya shouts, dismissing the doll. "So now you can summon 3 dolls and they act differently?" Bakugo asks. "I guess so," Midoriya says. "Thankfully they still listen and don't act out." "We don't need a rogue Bakugo on our hands," Yagi jokes, but his laugh is cut short by a glare from both Bakugo and Doll Bakugo. "Just so you know," Aizawa says, looking to the 2 students, "you're still considered late even if we walk to class together." The 2 looked at the clock, realizing just how much time had passed in the room before running out the door and towards the class. Once they were gone, Midnight burst out laughing. "I can't believe your marriage was almost exposed because of that doll." "You're lucky the 2 didn't think much about it," Yagi added. "There's something good that comes from this though." Mike walked over to Aizawa and presses his forehead to his. "Now I can love you twice as much." Midnight and Yagi ignored Mick's shout as Aizawa proceeds to headbutt him. I thought Midoriya and Bakugo were exaggerating. The class was in an uproar when Aizawa walked in, looking exactly the same as the 2 boys saw him just minutes ago. "Enough about me, I have an announcement for all of you," Aizawa says. "In 2 weeks UA will be hosting its annual sports festival." The good news was that the class was no longer yelling about Aizawa. The bad news was now they were yelling about the festival. "This is one of the most viewed events in the country, with the country's top heroes all watching," Aizawa explained. "This is one of your 3 chances to make a mark in the world of heroes." All previous anxiety and excitement amongst the class was replaced with a hardened determination at Aizawa's words. Midoriya's fists were clenched as he thought about what the next 2 weeks would entail. By the time lunch rolled around, everyone lingered in the class just a little longer, discussing the upcoming festival. "I'm sure all the heroes will be drawn to me immediately," Aoyama declares. Ashido bumps him out of the way and punches the air. "Not if my moves have anything to say about it." "I guess all our quirk training will be put into overdrive, huh?" Siro says. "Watch Midoriya be buried in dolls in a week's time," Gyro adds. The class looks over at Midoriya, who looked lost in thought as he stared at his bracelet. "Earth to Midoriya." Uraraka waves a hand in front of his face, bringing him back to reality. "Oh, sorry. Did you guys say something?" Midoriya asks. "What has you so lost in thought?" Ida asks. Midoriya gestures to his bracelet. "I feel iffy? I don't know if I should use these since it's you guys." "Hey jackass," Bakugo said. "It's not like you're possessing anyone. You're just using your quirk." "He's right, and besides," Kaminari adds, "we know our own weaknesses, so taking down the dolls won't be a hassle." "You better give us your all, Midori," Ashido adds. Midoriya nodded with a newfound vigor. "I won't let you guys down, but that reminds me. Over the break dash. Midoriya." A familiar voice called out to Midoriya, but his eyes widened when he saw who was at the door. While he was prepared to see Yagi standing and waiting for him, he wasn't ready to see him in his all-might form with a tiny lunchbox in his hand. "May I speak to you for a moment?" Everyone in the class turned to see Midoriya hurriedly packing up his things. "Of course, All Might." He raced out the door, leaving 17 students to wonder what just happened. Once they arrived in the empty staff lounge, Yagi deflated in a puff of smoke. "Sorry about that. The halls were filled so I couldn't find a place to detransform." "That's all right. What did you need to talk about?" Midoriya asked. Yagi gestured to one of the seats and the 2 sat down. Yagi cleared his throat as the two unpacked their lunches. First off, I'm glad to see your arm doing well. Nothing recovery girl can't handle, Midoriya. I also wanted to talk about the sports festival later this month. Yagi sounded more serious as he rested his elbows on his knees and leaned forward. Have you told anyone else about your new development yet? Just my mom, and she believed it. Perfect. So with the sports festival coming up, all eyes will be on your classmates, especially with what happened at USJ, Yagi began. With you taking up the mantle as the future symbol of peace, I think then would be a great time to show the world your new power. Midoriya looked at his teacher dumbfoundedly. You want me to not tell anyone about One for All and let it be a surprise? Precisely. What better way to make a name for yourself than with a surprise like that? Yagi proclaimed. I mean, Midoriya slowly nodded. You're definitely not wrong. I'll also be using Dollmaker way more because I still need to get a grasp on One for All. We'll definitely give it another shot before the festival, preferably with Recovery Girl with us. Midoriya looked down hesitantly. Are you sure about this? Yagi set his food down and placed a hand on Midoriya's shoulder. I need you to know that this is an option, not a demand. You can think on this, but I want you to remember how you felt on that beach the day you finished cleaning it. Midoriya slowly nodded. Noticing the mood change, Yagi picked up his lunch and gave Midoriya a smile. You didn't hear it from me, but I think Aizawa found the mic doll quite amusing. Midoriya let out a small chuckle. The two talking some more, and before they knew it, Midoriya was in a hurry to pack up. I better start heading back before I end up late. I'll see you soon, Midoriya. See you soon, Yagi. While exiting the room, Midoriya nearly collided with Uraraka and Ida, who were also making their way back. Oh, Midoriya. We missed you at lunch, Ida says. What did All Might want with you? Uraraka teased. Just checking up on me. Midoriya quickly said. I was the most injured yesterday, so. Well, that's very nice of him, Ida commented. We were all very worried when we couldn't find you outside. But then Kirishima told us how you made a doll Nomo. Uraraka exclaimed. And you were all like, go kick some villain or something like that. Something like that is more accurate, Midoriya laughed. I'm just glad I did it in time. A true hero, Uraraka said as she poked Midoriya. That remind me. Midoriya looks to Uraraka and Ida. If you don't mind me asking, how come you guys want to be heroes? While Uraraka turned red and looked away, Ida puffed out his chest proudly. If my name was familiar to you, it's because I come from a line of heroes in my family. You might know my brother Dash. Ingenium? Midoriya exclaimed. No wonder your quirk looked familiar. His agency has the most sidekicks out of anyone else's in Japan. And that's one of the many reasons why I love him. I hope to continue the family legacy with pride. I'm sure you'll do amazing. What about you, Uraraka? The two boys turned around to see Uraraka awkwardly standing behind them, rubbing the back of her neck and looking away. It's not the most noble cause, but I'm in it for the money, she says. My parents run a construction company, and I've always wanted to help them out ever since I was a kid. With a hero license, not only can I do that, but I can give them the life and rest that they deserve. It was silent in the hallway before Ida began applauding, startling her. Becoming a hero for family is nothing to be ashamed of. Becoming a hero to give your parents the life they deserve is pretty noble to me, Midoriya adds. Uraraka smiles up at her friends. I guess when you put it like that, thanks for the peace of mind. She then looks to Midoriya with a mischievous grin. I think we can guess why you want to be a hero. Really? I don't dash. It's All Might, Uraraka interrupts. Midoriya began to blush. I mean, you don't know that for sure. Midoriya, Ida says. You have one of his limited edition pins on your bag. We know. Hey Midori, Ashido says once the school day had ended and everyone was packing up to leave. What did you want to tell us before All Might whisked you away? Oh yeah, Sato adds. Something about the break? Midoriya opened his mouth but quickly shut it. Originally, he was planning on telling everyone about his recent quirk development, but his plan with Yagi threw it out the window. Before he could stutter out a lie though, Bakugo jumped in. You mean that thing you did this morning? Bakugo asked. Oh, yeah. Midoriya quickly said. I can summon 3 dolls now, and they all have a little bit of a personality now. Midoriya moved to open Bakugo's locket. Are you seriously using me as a FING test dummy again? Bakugo huffed. Once doll Bakugo appeared, the class watched it wait as began realizing that Midoriya wasn't giving it a command. The doll huffed. Are you seriously using me as a FING test dummy again? Yeah, okay, that's hilarious, Kaminari says. While most of the class laughed at the similarities, Todoroki moved towards the door and opened it, only to be stopped by a crowd of students waiting behind it. What's going on? Jair asked. Everyone knows about the sports festival now, which means they're checking out the competition, Bakugo says, moving to stand in front of the crowd. We're the kids who survived a villain attack after all. Doll Bakugo laughs from where it's standing. How nice of the extras to recognize the competition. Please ignore the clone, it doesn't go here. Zero shouts to the crowd. It's me, therefore it's right, Bakugo says. I knew you hero kids were cocky, a student says. But seeing it in person is a completely different experience. Now standing at the front of the crowd was a very tall boy with purple hair and heavy eye bags, looking at 1A with distaste. An interesting thing about the sports festival is that it isn't just a chance for the hero students to shine, but for Gen Ed students too, the boy began. With a ranking high enough, students can actually be switched into the hero course. Best of all, the reverse is true too. Hey! From the crowd came another student with silver hair and a large presence who pushed their way forward. I'm from 1B next door, he said. I wanted to find out more about you guys fighting those villains, but all I'm getting here is an arrogant BSTRD. He glared at Bakugo. You better not make a fool of the hero course. Unexpectedly, Bakugo didn't yell back. Expectedly, he did begin to shove everyone out of the way. Seeing Bakugo's seething anger, half of the crowd quickly left the hallway. What are you doing? We've got a whole mob after us now, Kirishima exclaims. And? Bakugo turns to face him. I'm aiming for the top. Why should I care? With that, the last of the students left the hallway and Bakugo left. Midoriya then noticed Todoroki, who was quietly observing, leaving as well. So straightforward, Kirishima whispered. Midoriya took a step back and observed his classmates, from Uraraka and Ida's fiery expressions to Tokoyami and Kirishima looking at doll Bakugo and nodding in agreement. Remember how you felt on that beach? He finally had his answer. Midoriya nervously looked around his class's waiting room from his seat, trying his best not to pass out from nerves. The past 2 weeks have been a blur of practicing both his original quirk and speech that he had to present, because apparently getting first in the exams meant that he had to represent every first year. As for one-for-all practice, well, he hoped he wouldn't have to rely on it too much. He was brought out of his daze by a hit to the head by Bakugo, who was scowling at him. Your muttering is making everyone else more nervous, not to mention you're distracting. Sorry, I just don't want to mess up my speech. Well dash. Bakugo was interrupted by footsteps approaching them. The two looked up to see Todoroki Shudo of all people approaching them, stopping in front of Midoriya. Midoriya looked around and noticed everyone's conversations coming to a halt as they watched them. Yes. I'd say that, objectively, I'm stronger than you, Todoroki says, causing Midoriya to sputter. Todoroki continued on. You have some sort of connection to All Might's secretary, and now All Might himself, judging by how he asked you to join him for lunch. I just want to tell you that I will be beating you today. Huh, all right dude, Kirishima suddenly says, putting a hand on Todoroki's shoulder. Let's calm down. We're all friends here after all. Todoroki shrugs off Kirishima's hand. I'm not here to make friends. Midoriya finally snaps out of his confused daze and stands up, meeting Todoroki's eye. I'll admit, you are stronger than me. Dude, don't sell yourself short, Kirishima whispers. But that doesn't mean I'll bow down so easily. Everyone, not just the hero students, are going to give it their all today, me included. Everyone stared at the two as Todoroki silently nods, And only Midoriya seems to notice a glint in his eyes as he does so. As Todoroki walks back to where he was waiting, Bakugo snaps out of his trance too. Hey, Icy Hot. The only person who you should be concerned about is me. Todoroki doesn't bother with a reply as he continues to walk, leaving behind an enraged Bakugo. Unfortunately for Bakugo, he didn't have time to yell again as Ida announced that it was their time to walk into the stadium. You ready? Uraraka whispers to Midoriya. As I'll ever be, Midoriya replies. Okay, maybe he wasn't as ready as he thought he was. The moment Midnight announced his name as the first-year representative, his mind went blank. It wasn't until Ida gave him a nudge forward that he realized that, oh wait, that's him. He has to go up there. As he walked up the stage, he could hear the muttering coming from all the other first years. Seriously? A hero student? What else would you expect? Midoriya blocked out the rest of the mutters as he made his way onto the stage. Once he was in front of the mic, the realization of just how many people had his eyes on him, both in person and through a screen, hit him like a truck. Midoriya begins, only to stop when the feedback blasted through the speaker. He winced at the noise blasting through the stadium. It's okay. Just say what you practiced and go. UA's sports festival has been a time-honored tradition since the rise of quirks, with students competing and giving it their all, this year being no exception. Midoriya took a deep breath and looked at his classmates. The sports festival represents a lot to many different people. It's a chance to show who we are. He looks over at 1B. It's a chance to prove why we belong here. He looks over at the Gen Ed students. It's a chance to give it your all and make a statement. Finally, he looks over to the support students. And it's a chance to show the world what your minds are made of. He watched as the scowls on everyone's faces disappear, either turning into blank expressions or large smiles, depending on how the person thought of 1A. I pledge on behalf of all first years that we will give it our all in today's competition, not only for you, but for ourselves as well. Plus Ultra. Plus Ultra. The stadium cheers back, startling Midoriya for a moment. He walks back down the stairs to where all the first years were, awkwardly smiling at all the applause and cheers he was receiving. Now was that so hard? Bakugo asks. Judging by how he looked close to passing out up there, I'd say yes, Uraraka says. I'm sure no one noticed, Ida says, patting Midoriya's shoulder. Midoriya could only let out a small laugh as Midnight began to announce the first round of the tournament, which was an obstacle course. Purposefully standing all the way to the left, Midoriya stared at his bracelet as everyone got ready. As the countdown hit 0, he summoned his doll, knowing exactly what was about to happen. The ground turned into an icy arena as Todoroki shot forward on his ice, leaving many students stuck in the ice behind him. Looks like a good chunk of the competition has been taken out already, Mike announced. Todoroki Shudo's ice managed to capture many students, but interestingly enough, not his fellow classmates. Class 1A is already beginning to recognize their classmates' strategies, Aizawa commented. All of them managed to avoid the ice with ease. Start carrying me forward. Doll Shuji nodded before lifting Midoriya onto his shoulder and running forward, easily pushing through the crowd. Luckily for Midoriya, Doll Shuji's quirk was not needed, making it so that he didn't need to deal with its drawbacks. Although they weren't at the front, he was impressed with the distance they covered in such a short amount of time. The doll's quick sprint was cut short as the crowd began to become more and more dense, and Midoriya wasn't quite sure what was happening until a large amount of ice shot up from ground, and he could now see the robots from the entrance exam, many of which were now encased in what was most likely Todoroki's ice. In a not-so-shocking turn of events, Todoroki Shudo managed to completely freeze half the robots. Mike announced. Put me down and protect me, Midoriya commanded to the doll. Now with his feet on the ground, he needed a new plan. He couldn't simply run past the robots, not with them attacking students who were slipping on the ice Todoroki left behind. His only option was to stand his ground and fight when he had to. Taking a deep breath, he ran forward. Doll Shuji was a big help in keeping him stable on the ice, and he nearly slipped a few times. He was nearly past the obstacle when he felt the comforting presence of the doll disappear, and whipped around to see Doll Shuji fade away like dust, a one-pointer's claw protruding from where it stood. Looks like one of the bots took out one of Midoriya's dolls. I don't think he'll be pleased about that. Midoriya's face hardened as he looked at the robot. I'll deal with you myself. He silently thanked Yagi as he dodged the robot's next attack, picking up a discarded piece of metal and whacking one of its claws off and leaping back. He looks at his hands for a moment. No, he thinks. I can't use one for all now. Just as the robot begins to sprint towards Midoriya, he ducks and swings the piece of metal, taking off the robot's head on one clean swing. He drops the piece of metal and runs forward to continue the race, running into the second stage. The giant chasm was enough of an indicator of what he had to do, and judging by the slow crawl some students were doing on the ropes, he doubted his ability on it. He looked from Bakugo basically flying across the pit to Tsu easily crawling along the rope. As easy as it was for them, their dolls wouldn't be much help. It wasn't until he saw one specific classmate that an idea began to form in his head. In a flash, Doll Yaoyorozu and Doll Kaminari appeared at his side, both looking at the giant pit. I can't make you a catapult, Doll Yaoyorozu says. And I can't power it even if it can be made, Doll Kaminari adds. I don't need much from you too. Doll Yaoyorozu, can you make a grappling gun for me? Midoriya asks. Now that I can do, the doll says with a smile. It took a bit longer than what the real Yaoyorozu would take, but it was eventually made and immediately handed to Doll Kaminari. Ugh, the doll trails off. Your quirk may be weaker but you still have Kaminari skills, Midoriya says. Can't hit something if you don't have great aim, so shoot this across and hit one of the metal pegs on the other side. Sure thing, Zuku, the doll says with a smile. Doll Kaminari takes aim and fires the grappling gun, the hook landing exactly where they needed it to be. He hands the gun back to Midoriya. Midoriya takes one last look at them and sprints towards the pit. Thanks guys. He dismisses the dolls just as he jumps into the pit, holding onto the gun tightly and braced himself as his feet slammed into the opposite side of the pit as he caught himself. When he was stable, he clicked the button on the gun, allowing himself to brought up and back on stable ground. Discarding the item, he made his way over to the final obstacle. At first glance, it looked like there wasn't even an obstacle, but that was before he saw a Gen Ed student fly backwards in a cloud of pink smoke. Most of our contestants have now reached the final obstacle, the minefield. Midoriya really wished he kept that piece of metal with him. Instead, he looked back down at his bracelet and summoned the doll that could probably help him the most. What's up, Izuku? Doll Gyro says. Extend your ear jacks ahead of us and clear out a path as we walk, Midoriya commanded. Send out heartbeats so you won't get hurt. On it. The good news was that the plan worked perfectly, and Midoriya and Doll Gyro got through with ease, leaving behind everyone else. The less good news was that Todoroki and Bakugo beat them to the finish line, earning Midoriya a solid third place. As he waited for everyone else to cross the finish line, he saw Gyro approach him. Dude, do you know how weird it is to see yourself cross the finish line on the monitors and for a solid second think, is that actually me? Am I the doll? Midoriya burst out laughing. I can't say I've heard that before. It was another 10 minutes before everyone completed the race, and Midoriya was pleased to spend that time laying on the grass, waiting for the rest of his friends. His peaceful rest was interrupted by both Ishido and Uraraka hurling themselves on top of him. Well, hello Mr. Third Place, Uraraka says. I saw the replay on the monitors of you at the pit. Are you crazy? Ishido yells. Maybe, Midoriya says. Standing up with the others. Where's everyone else? Ida went to go talk to Yaoyorozu, and I saw Kirishima walking up to Bakugo, Uraraka replied. The trio made their way over to Midnight's podium, where she was waiting for everyone to meet. Well, I'm glad to see all of you who have made it. Unfortunately, only the first 42 people will continue on to the next round, which is... She turns to the screen behind her, where Calvary Race appeared behind her in big letters. She quickly explained the rules to everyone. This year, we will allow you to try and knock over the riders, but anything too drastic will be cause for elimination. Each of your headband's points will go up by 5, except for first place, whose headband is worth 1 million points. Midoriya could see everyone's eyes turn deadly as they all looked at Todoroki, who looked as indifferent as always. You have 15 minutes to team up. Midoriya immediately looked to his left, where Uraraka was smiling up at him and giving him a thumbs up. He turned to his right to look at Ishido, but instead was met with the sight of Bakugo grabbing the back of her shirt and dragging her away. Well, at least we know where Bakugo stands too, Uraraka said. Where do you think Ida is? When they eventually found him, they were met with an awkward smile. I'm sorry, Midoriya, but I haven't stopped thinking about how I was bested in our last fight. I want to be able to grow from it, and I won't be able to on your team. You're my friend, but you're also my rival. You don't need to apologize. Midoriya replies. I'm friends with Bakugo. I know I good motive when I see it. Good luck. What now? Uraraka asks, watching Ida join Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, and Kaminari. Midoriya looked around at all the different groups, an idea formulating in his mind. Uraraka, what do you think of bending the rules a bit? The feral grin on Uraraka's face was one that could rival Bakugo's. 3, 2, 1, go. Midoriya felt his mount move back as the free-for-all began, with Todoroki being everyone's #1 target. He figured it was only a matter of time before Mike noticed the setup he and Uraraka had. Kaminari sends a bolt of lightning straight at Shuji's team, stunning him as they go for Azui's headbands and wait. Is that 5 people on Midoriya's team? There it is. The big screen monitors switch to show Uraraka, Doll Zero, Doll Ojiro, and Doll Shuji, all of them supporting Midoriya as the rider, who was commanding each doll. The rules stated that there needed to be 2 to 4 contestants on each team, and that's exactly what Midoriya did, Aizawa explained. Those 3 dolls are not contestants, just his quirk. I'm going to need to swap out soon, Midoriya tells his team. Uraraka, go. Uraraka reaches up and high-fives Midoriya, activating his quirk. Go for it, Deku. Midoriya hovers above the group for a few seconds, getting rid of the doll Ojiro and quickly replacing it with doll Ishido. Uraraka deactivates her quirk, helping to catch Midoriya. Doll Ishido, keep everyone at bay, Midoriya instructs. Doll Zero, aim for one of the people carrying the silver guy. If an emergency comes up, you all move aside, listen to Uraraka, and let Shuji cover me, got it? Roger that, Midori. Got it, Izuku. I hear you. Wait, you're putting me in charge? The herd charged forward toward the team of 1B students, Doll Ishido keeping back anyone who tried to come close. Once they were in range, Doll Zero shot out the small amount of tape it had, wrapping it around the ankle of the boy with spiky black hair, and pulled, causing him to lose his balance and knock his friends over. Before they could all hit the ground, vines shot up and pushed them the opposite way, letting them regain themselves. The vines receded back towards the only girl on their team, who was the origin of the vines. The team turned around to face Midoriya's, and Midoriya recognized the silver boy as the one who confronted their class 2 weeks ago. He looked at Midoriya and squinted. You're the one who's friends with the loud guy, aren't you? That's not a conscious choice. Being loud or being friends with him? Yes. The boy looked over at the girl. Shiozaki? On it, the girl replied, and Midoriya watched her hair slowly rise up before heading towards him. He ducked his head and watched the vines retract back. Switch, he shouted, and as he floated, Doll Ishido was quickly swapped for Doll Jiru. Defend us. Doll Jiru nodded and began batting away the vines sent towards them. The 2 teams were at a standstill as their only ranged fighters duked it out, providing the perfect distraction for Midoriya. It was a stretch, but maybe one for all would help him get lucky. He ducked his head and strained the bonds that tied him to his dolls, letting a 4th doll flicker into existence just for 1 moment. Doll Inko, get their headbands. He could feel the dolls holding him up shake as Doll Inko used her quirk to pull the headbands towards his team. As they flew off, Uraraka held a hand open to catch them. The moment she did, Doll Inko was dismissed, and Midoriya began heaving. While the other team was distracted by what just happened, Doll Jiru used the last of its strength to push the team's rider off and onto the ground. Team Tetsu is eliminated. Mike announced. Deku, it worked. Are you dash? Uraraka cut herself off as she looked at Midoriya and the rest of the dolls with shock. What is it? Midoriya asked. He looked at the dolls and fell silent, seeing black liquid leak from their pupilless eyes, just like from the entrance exam. He touched his cheek and felt something wet. Drawing it back, he saw the same black liquid staining his hands. "Should we not to the rest of the plan?" she asked. "We probably have enough to make the cut." Untying the headbands with Inko's quirk took a lot out of all of you. "No," Midoriya responds, wiping the black liquid away. Simultaneously, the dolls did the same thing. "When we win, we will win big." Uraraka gave him a stern nod and high-fived him, allowing him to swap Doll Zero for Doll Bakugo. Doll Bakugo placed a hand on the ground and let out an explosion. The dust gave them the perfect smoke screen to prepare for their final plan. Uraraka could feel her heart pound as they headed towards their last opponent. With 5 minutes left on the clock, every other team gave up on their fight to get the 10 million, instead turning on one another, leaving Todoroki's team to wait for the clock to run out. Uraraka's team slowly approached them, and Todoroki's team shifted into a defensive stance. "What's up?" Midoriya asks. Todoroki remains silent, but Kaminari entertains them with a response. "Us, once we take you down." "You sure about that?" Doll Bakugo growls. "Enough talking," Todoroki interrupts. "Are you fighting or not? Now why can't a group of friends have a nice chat?" Uraraka says with a pout. "What are you playing at?" Ida asks. "Running out the clock won't help you here." "Neither is sitting on your buttes, but I guess we all make mistakes," Doll Bakugo says. "Midoriya, now is not the time for small talk," Yaoyorozu says. "Actually, it's the perfect time," Midoriya says. "We're all friends here, right?" "I already said I'm not here to make friends," Todoroki snaps, his right arm frosting up. "Doing this isn't helping you." Uraraka could barely hid her grin as Midoriya quietly laughs. "Actually, we don't have to do anything." "What are you dash?" Todoroki cuts himself off, his eyes wide at the team across from him. "Where's the third doll?" Before anyone else could react, the 10 million headband was snatched from Todoroki's forehead and headed towards Midoriya's open hand. Midoriya smiled as the headband seemed to float towards them. "Thank you, Doll Hagakure." "Ida!" Todoroki nearly shouts, and Uraraka watched as Ida's engines began revving. From the corner of her eye, she spots Bakugo's team heading over, finished with whatever fight they were fighting. "Deku? Any last-minute plans?" she asked, but she received no response. She braced herself for whatever was going to happen when the three teams eventually clashed. She looked up one last time at Midoriya, who strangely had one arm raised and flicked his finger. And then the strangest thing happened. A gust of wind so strong it nearly knocked Midoriya over came from his finger, and completely blew back both Bakugo and Todoroki's team. She was so shocked, she nearly missed the flicker of flames die out on Todoroki's left arm. She looked up at Midoriya once more, who was sat still and shocked as he stared down at his broken finger. Everyone in the stadium, from the audience to the contestants, were silent at what just happened, until Mike finally broke the silence. Since when could he do that? And then the 15 minutes were up.